Because she knew that if she wanted to realize her dream and live a peaceful life with her family, there were indeed some things that could be done while the world was in chaos. Jishi, it's better to order people to carefully observe the situation in the city these days. Sir Xie and the others are about to arrive. We also need to make preparations in advance. When he met her bright and beautiful eyes, Pang Xiao couldn't care about anything else in his heart. He planted a few more light kisses on her cheeks before he finally compromised under her unwilling gaze. Don't worry, I'll handle these things carefully. However, based on what I see now, I'm afraid that if we don't touch the treasures, it won't be enough to let the people live. Qin Yining's expression was also a bit heavy. She nodded and said, You think so? If your majesty could get food, why would he fake it and scheme? Who doesn't rub powder on their face? It seems that your majesty really doesn't have the money to buy food. In addition, the granaries in various places have been abandoned for many years. That's why he can't take out food at this critical moment. Our Daju has indeed experienced natural and man-made disasters. However, it's not to the extent that the entire Daju dynasty has run out of food. There is still food, and there must be some from the previous year's storage. However, these are not in your majesty's hands. Pang Xiao's words hit the nail on the head. Qin Yining nodded repeatedly and said, That's right. There are people everywhere who make money from the country's calamity. Those merchants and rich people have more noble titles than ordinary people. They also have the financial ability to support themselves. This year's natural disaster was foretold. From then on, they began to stockpile food. Now, they are selling it at a high price. They can earn a large sum of money and feed their own families. It's the best of both worlds. Isn't that right? You've analyzed their hearts thoroughly. Pang Xiao patted her delicate shoulder with his large hand and said with a smile, However, don't worry. They are stockpiling food to do business. If your majesty really can't take out the rice, we will have to think of a way to buy it from these rich people who have stockpiled food. Speaking of purchasing, they naturally had to use the silver from the treasure. I know. I also think that the treasure should be taken from the people and used by the people. It's just that I'm a little worried. After all, the people who know about the treasure are all your trusted aides. Since they're doing their best to assist you, it's undeniable that they're more or less trying to get the credit of succeeding the emperor. These people are the mainstays of your side. It's best that you don't make a decision that will disappoint them. Pang Xiao sighed helplessly. I won't disappoint them. However, I can already foresee that if we want to use the treasure, we will have to go through a complicated process. Many of them will not be willing to let me take out the silver to give to the people for free. Qin Yining's expression was grave. That's exactly what I am worried about. Your followers and strategists are doing their best to follow us. Naturally, we have to consider their feelings. However, whether or not the silver should be used by the people can also become a topic of discussion. This shows that these people are against it. If you can't persuade them, I'm afraid that they will become more and more dissatisfied with you. This is understandable. They are following you because they want you to reach that position. Pang Xiao did not say anything. She only hugged Qin Yining's waist and pulled him into her embrace. Qin Yining's meaning was very clear. She was worried that if he insisted on using the treasure, those who followed him would betray him. Moreover, they had a lot of his secrets in their hands. This was a very big unforeseen event for him. However, could he ignore the lives of the people just because he was worried about this? If he did that, then he would really become a person like Li Qitian. Don't worry. I will take care of these things. After hearing Pang Xiao's words, Qin Yining did not continue this topic. In any case, the result was the same for them. As long as they worked for the people, it would be difficult for them to escape some fixed fate. For the next day, Qin Yining and Pang Xiao arranged for people to go to the city to investigate the situation. The news they received was even more disappointing and helpless than they had imagined. Even though it was a city near the sea, half of the people had starved to death. Although the situation here was still better than the miserable situation they had encountered on the way here, 9 out of 10 houses were empty. However, Qin Yining still could not maintain a smile on his face. In the evening, when the sky was filled with red clouds, Huzi came back and said, Wang Yi, Wang Fei, Tang Xiu is protecting Sir Xie, Sir Shu, and a few other gentlemen. They have already arrived at the main hall in front of the second courtyard through the side door. Pang Xiao thought for a moment, then stood up and said to Qin Yining, you rest first. I will go and see those gentlemen. Qin Yining knew that he was going to discuss serious matters, so he smiled and nodded, go ahead. We will wait for you to come back and eat dinner together. If you encounter any problems, don't be impatient. You can discuss it properly. Since Qin Yining said this, it meant that he was certain that he would encounter some obstacles on this trip. I know. Don't worry. I'm not an unreasonable person. Qin Yining stood up and sent Pang Xiao out. When they arrived at the second courtyard, he could not help but remind him, this is not a place to talk. You have to be careful. Pang Xiao turned to look at Qin Yining, who was chasing after her and nagging. Seeing that her beautiful eyebrows were furrowed, she could not help but smile reassuringly, don't worry. I know how to deal with it. Qin Yining could only nod and lead Ji Yun and Bing Tang back to their room worriedly. Chapter 11:11. Xie Yu and Shu Weiji immediately sighed heavily. The other strategists also had grave expressions. To be honest, what we've seen and heard along the way is truly depressing. We've followed Wang Yi for so many years, and all we ask for is to not see such a miserable scene again. Exactly. I really don't know what your Majesty is thinking. Does he not know that the world is in such a miserable state? Speaking of this, the strategists were filled with righteous indignation. They all reprimanded with dissatisfaction, Your Majesty's actions are truly too heartless. As an emperor, all he thinks about is not how to benefit the people, but how to concentrate all his strength and not care about the lives of his subordinates. That's right, such actions, such petty behavior, it truly makes one look down on him. They had followed Pang Xiao for a long time. With Xie Yu and Shu Weiji as the leaders, they had come into contact with many secrets that others had not come into contact with. For example, the matter of the treasure, everyone present knew about it. Pang Xiao trusted them so much and allowed them to come into contact with the most secretive matters. In their hearts, they naturally felt that their status was a level higher than the other strategists who had not been invited. Thus, when they spoke of these matters, they did not have any misgivings and said whatever they thought. Pang Xiao allowed everyone to vent their thoughts. Only then did he say in a low voice, "Since things have come to this, it is useless to think about your Majesty's actions. The disaster is wreaking havoc right now. I'm sure everyone has seen it clearly along the way." After Pang Xiao spoke, everyone fell silent and looked questioningly at Pang Xiao. The disaster is wreaking havoc. Your Majesty's relief of food only gave this king 8 carts. It has already been used up from the capital to here. The journey to the south is long, and the relief of the imperial court will not be able to arrive in a short period of time. The weather is getting colder by the day, and the people are suffering from hunger and cold. How are they going to survive? When Xie Yu and Shu Weiji heard this, they could vaguely guess why Pang Xiao wanted to talk to them today. For a moment, they didn't speak, but carefully weighed the pros and cons in their hearts. The strategists had sharp minds and were good at scheming. Pang Xiao's words did not need to be said. Everyone understood that Pang Xiao intended to use the treasure to help the disaster victims. Wang Yi. This old man deeply admires your benevolence and devotion to the people. But you have to think about how difficult it was to obtain that treasure. And this treasure is one of your trump cards. Yeah, Wang Yi. As soon as one person spoke, others followed suit. Wang Yi is a benevolent and righteous person. For the sake of the people, he doesn't care about gold and silver. However, the emperor has always been afraid of you and has tried to kill you several times. Right now, for the sake of the princess, you have to preserve your strength. That's right. Wang Yi, if you want to achieve great things, you can't be soft-hearted and push the opportunity to others for no reason. You're sacrificing yourself and making a wedding dress for others. It hasn't been easy for you to come all this way. For the sake of Daju, for the sake of being loyal to your Majesty, how much have you sacrificed? But how has your Majesty treated you? Your Majesty should be the one to help the victims. He refused to provide food, But he asked you to help the victims. He wants you to help for no reason. Such a fatuous ruler is not worthy of your help. The Taytan people have already attacked Huichuan, but the fatuous ruler is still afraid of his meritorious subjects. He's not willing to give you a chance to go to Huichuan. The few of them spoke one after another, voicing out the dissatisfaction that had accumulated in their hearts for a long time. Pang Xiao naturally knew that these people who were willing to follow him until now were all loyal and devoted. What they said was indeed true. This time, if he took out the treasure because he couldn't stand it and didn't want the people to suffer, the outcome might very well be the same as what the strategists were worried about. He would fork out the money, but all the credit would be taken by Li Chitian. Moreover, even if they didn't say it out loud, they understood in their hearts. The amount of money needed to help the victims was a bottomless pit. There were so many people in Daeju who were affected by the disaster. Pang Xiao would have to pass through many places on his way to the old capital of the Yang dynasty. No matter how many treasures there were, how long could he last? Xie Yu sighed and said, Wang Yi, the matter of food for the people in this world shouldn't be on your shoulders. Wang Yi has sacrificed too much for the people and for Daeju. When they heard Xie Yu say this, the other strategists immediately felt their backbone. Xie Yu and Xu Weiji were Pang Xiao's two most trusted aides. It could be said that when the strategists were making decisions or couldn't find the right direction, they would first look at these two people's words. Their guesses were basically what Pang Xiao was thinking. Therefore, when Xie Yu said this, the other strategists all began to criticize Li Chitian. They criticized him for being selfish and heartless. They criticized him for not caring about the lives of the people. There were even some who slammed the table and stood up to scold him. Wang Yi, you can't be soft-hearted. You think about doing it for the people, but in the end, those people who eat the food you think of ways to get might not be grateful to you. When Pang Xiao heard this, he raised his hand. Only then did everyone's voices gradually stop. They looked at Pang Xiao expectantly. Pang Xiao looked at Xu Weiji and smiled. Mr. Xu, what do you think? Xu Weiji looked up at Pang Xiao's handsome face. He saw his gentle smile and couldn't read any emotions. After thinking for a moment, he immediately understood. Wang Yi, I think there's a very good saying. Xu Weiji stood up and bowed. Pang Xiao raised his eyebrows and wanted to laugh. Oh, Mr. Xu, you're talking about that saying. Water can carry a boat, but it can also overturn it. There's another saying, the one who wins the hearts of the people rules the world. Xu Weiji smiled shrewdly. He didn't elaborate and sat back down. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but look at Xu Weiji in confusion. However, they were all smart people. In the blink of an eye, they understood what Xu Weiji meant. They couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Those with more stable tempers could still hold themselves back and not say a word. Meanwhile, those who were more impatient already said anxiously, Wang Yi, you have to think carefully. If you don't get that treasure, it's very likely that it will be the foundation for you to use your troops in the future. If you use it now, you'll save those irrelevant people. You might even want to stick gold in the face of the incapable ruler. What exactly are you after? Those who achieve great things don't bother about trifles. Wang Yi, you mustn't be soft-hearted. However, Xie Yu shook his head. Everyone, you've probably forgotten why we followed Wang Yi in the first place. Their gazes shifted to Xie Yu. Xie Yu said, everyone, what you said is reasonable. We're also doing this for Wang Yi's sake. The reason why Wang Yi is worthy of our loyalty and why we're willing to sacrifice our blood for Wang Yi, isn't it because of Wang Yi's character? If Wang Yi doesn't care about the lives of the people at this time and only wants to protect the treasure, then what difference is there between his actions and that of an incapable ruler? Everyone was stunned when they heard this. For a moment, they couldn't find any words to refute. Xie Yu said, this old man agrees with Brother Shu's words. Now is the time for Wang Yi to win the hearts of the people. Your Highness has a bright future ahead of you. Why should you be constrained by these yellow and white things in front of you? The room was silent. Everyone was analyzing Xie Yu and Xu Weiji's words. It was clear that Wang Yi had already made his decision. Pang Xiao saw that everyone was silent. He stood up and said slowly, "This king followed the emperor and started the uprising because the Northern Ji dynasty's incapable ruler was muddle-headed and tyrannical. He oppressed the people and there was no peace in the world. This king wanted to restore order to the world, so he inherited his late father's unfulfilled wish and followed the emperor. Over the years, our gang's actions do not seek merit, but to not make mistakes. Even if we have to sacrifice our family and suffer some grievances, this king can endure it. Because this king knows what he wants. This king doesn't want personal glory. He wants the world to become what this king wants it to be. The world is so big, the mountains and rivers are magnificent. If there are no people, how will the fields be cultivated? How will the future generations reproduce? How will a Jew without people resist the invasion of foreign tribes? When the time comes, won't the Tatan just ride straight to the capital to harvest grain?" Everyone listened to Pang Xiao's powerful words and couldn't help but feel their blood boil. That's right. They had followed Pang Xiao for many years, and they had given him advice and suggestions. They had gone through many trials and tribulations. Although they wanted to succeed the emperor, when they had followed Pang Xiao, who hadn't been filled with hot-bloodedness for the sake of the world. After so many years, they were getting closer and closer to success, but they had forgotten their original thoughts. "Everyone knows what we are doing for," Pang Xiao said in a deep voice. "This king has decided to use the Dian's treasure for disaster relief. He is really taking from the people and using it for the people. Does anyone have any objections?" After a long talk, who didn't understand Pang Xiao's thoughts? Some people objected in their hearts. They felt that the money was not worth it here. However, Pang Xiao's high-spirited posture and calmness, and the most important thing was that he always maintained his original goal, which was to let the people live a good life. They really admired him. The few of them who had been calculating their future prospects now truly understood what it meant to be hot-blooded and heroic. It even diluted their inherent thoughts. Seeing that no one objected, Pang Xiao said, "Since that's the case, this king intends to order people to quietly send the treasure back. This year, the season is not good. Most of the people's families have no harvest. Some rich merchants have already stocked up on grain in large quantities when the disaster first appeared. There is a lot of grain in this world, but it is not in the hands of your majesty. Now that this king intends to take back the treasure, he has begun to send people to search for suitable people to buy grain. Even if the price of rice is expensive, that large amount of treasure can support them for a while. After this winter, when the flowers bloom in spring next year, let the disaster victims return to their hometowns and start farming again. Their lives will be better." Wang Yi's words are reasonable. There are many profiteers who make money from the country's disaster. I'm afraid that when Wang Yi goes to buy grain, he will be covered in blood. Shu Weiji warned. Pang Xiao smiled. This king knows. This king will naturally have a way to deal with these people. When the strategists saw that Pang Xiao had already made up his mind, and that no matter how much they said, they would not be able to change Pang Xiao's mind, they all quieted down and stopped pointing fingers. They only thought about how to help Pang Xiao do things well. Chapter 11-12. The strategists more or less had some opinions about Pang Xiao's decision. After all, no matter who it was, they had spent so much effort to obtain the treasure. Wang Fei had even taken a warship out to sea. In the end, they did not spend a single penny on their soldiers. No matter how they thought about it, they would feel that they had suffered a loss. But they were all sensible people. Wang Yi was so benevolent to the people. Everything he did was the opposite of Li Qitian. The difference in character between the two was obvious. Thinking about it this way, everyone felt that they had not chosen the wrong person. After all, no one wanted to follow a lord who treated human lives like grass. Even if such a person ascended to the throne, what good fate would they have if they became cabinet ministers? As a result, everyone made a decision in their hearts. Those who could not accept it before could now accept it. Seeing that no one had any more objections, Pang Xiao still had a calm smile on his face, but he was secretly relieved. The strategists in front of him were the elites that Pang Xiao valued after painstakingly managing them over the years. Their approval was very important to Pang Xiao. If he could not obtain the support of the people he trusted, his actions in the future might be full of loopholes. For example, Dao Hanshan had tried to assassinate Qin Yining because he did not agree with his ideas. He felt that a woman like Qin Yining had interfered too much in the previous matters. If it was not for Sakurai, Qin Yining would have been long gone. Pang Xiao absolutely did not want such a thing to happen again. The accident that happened in the past already showed his mistakes and incompetence. Now, they were walking on the edge of a knife. If he could not even control the internal problems, how could he eliminate the external problems? After making up his mind, Pang Xiao discussed with everyone in a low voice. In the end, they decided to send out two groups of people. One group would go to the deserted island and quietly transport the treasure in batches and place it in different areas. The other group would go to different areas to investigate. If they found that there were rich merchants storing grain or people profiting from the national disaster and selling grain, they would secretly record it so that Pang Xiao could target and purchase grain in the future. The island where the treasure was located was near Golden Harbor, so it wouldn't take much effort to transport a portion of it. Pang Xiao also ordered people to check if anyone in Golden Harbor had any grain. After the decision was made, Pang Xiao's mood improved a lot. However, everything he did had to be done in secret. He could not reveal any details to Magistrate Chen. Pang Xiao saw how Magistrate Chen looked like he wanted to say something but stopped himself every time he saw him. He was so anxious that he scratched his head and didn't know what to do. Pang Xiao thought for a moment and wrote another memorial, ordering someone to send it to the capital as fast as possible. Magistrate Chen had mixed feelings when he saw that Pang Xiao had sent a letter to him again. The capital wasn't far from Golden Harbor, so it shouldn't have been 3 or 4 days without any news. In just a few days, Wang Yi had submitted several memorials requesting Your Majesty to send food and aid, but Your Majesty did not do anything. Although Magistrate Chen was straightforward, he wasn't a fool. Your Majesty's way of doing things was completely different from the way Magistrate Chen imagined an emperor to be. The enormous difference and the resources he had been waiting for were slowly wearing away at this loyal official's patience and hope. How many innocent people have starved to death before the food arrives? Why hasn't Your Majesty made any arrangements? Don't be impatient. Your Majesty is also gathering food. He must have thought of a way. We need to hold fast. Pang Xiao hadn't had time to shave in the past 2 days. He was casually wearing a blue cotton robe with arrow sleeves and a jade belt buckle at his waist. It could be seen that he had lost a lot of weight. Everyone had been eating thin porridge these days. Magistrate Chen definitely wouldn't give all the food to Pang Xiao and Qin Yining just because they were of high status. At the beginning, Magistrate Chen's trusted aides had tried to persuade him. Even Furan Chen had secretly urged Magistrate Chen to at least send some dried food and fish to Wang Fei. They shouldn't be too harsh on nobles. But Magistrate Chen had a stubborn temper and didn't listen to them. Time reveals a person's heart. Wang Yi and Wang Fei weren't the kind of nobles who lived like princes. They would eat thin porridge and help out at the porridge stall. They weren't like those noble children who were high up in the air. Now, Pang Xiao's image in Magistrate Chen's mind had changed greatly. Therefore, Magistrate Chen was very convinced by Pang Xiao's words. Wang Yi is right. No matter what, His Majesty wouldn't leave us with nothing. But reality proved that Magistrate Chen was still too naive. They waited for another 3 days. The time they waited added up was enough for the food to be transported from the capital and back. There was still no movement from Li Chitian. Not only was there no food, there wasn't even a reply. Magistrate Chen only felt disheartened. The last bit of food in the city has been taken out. Together with the dried fish, it's just enough to let the people survive for a day or 2. As Magistrate Chen spoke, he drank a large bowl of warm water to resist the hunger in the residence. Wang Yi, why hasn't Your Majesty sent any news? The weather is cold and there's no food. This official is really scared. Jinggang was located in the north. The weather at the end of October was already autumn. But in such a mature season like autumn, they didn't harvest a single grain. It was a season full of hope, But they were starving and waiting for death. The person who should be saving them the most didn't do anything. Pang Xiao also drank a bowl of warm water. Seeing County Magistrate Chen, who was full of righteousness and always seemed to have inexhaustible energy, at this moment he looked like a frosted eggplant, Pang Xiao could not help but sympathize. Such a good official who was in charge of such an important hub town like Jinggang didn't have a good position. And such a responsible person naturally cared about the lives of the people the most. It could be said that the death of every ordinary person was a thorn in Magistrate Chen's heart. The more people died, the more holes his heart was riddled with. Pang Xiao couldn't bear to see such a righteous person break down. Thinking about the letters he had received in the past few days and counting the days, Pang Xiao suddenly stood up and said, "Lord Chen, why don't you go with this king?" "Go? Where does Wang Yi plan to go?" Magistrate Chen didn't understand Pang Xiao's meaning. Body Pang Xiao's eyes were full of the domineering aura of a person who had been in power for a long time and the ruthlessness of a person who would do anything to achieve his goals. He turned to look at Magistrate Chen and said, "I remember there's a place called Minhui village near Jinggang. There's a rich man living there. People call him Squire Liu." Lord Chen's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He nervously stammered, "Wang Yi, why are you asking this? Don't take it too hard. Your reputation will be ruined by robbing the rich to help the poor." "Robbing the rich to help the poor? Do you think this king is a bandit? Do you think he'll rush in and rob him?" Pang Xiao was amused and laughed. Seeing Pang Xiao like this, Lord Chen thought for a moment and felt that his words were a little stupid. He couldn't help but smile awkwardly. "Wang Yi, please don't blame me. I'm a straightforward official and am full of nonsense." Pang Xiao waved his hand and interrupted Lord Chen's words. He smiled and said, "This king won't rob the rich to help the poor. The people are starving to death. I believe that these rich men also want to do something for the people, but they don't have the connections. This king has to visit them now, so that the kind-hearted people won't have a place to donate. Don't you think so?" Lord Chen was stunned when he heard this. He was almost stunned by Pang Xiao's words. Wasn't this robbing the rich to help the poor? It was just a more euphemistic way of saying it. They couldn't wait for the relief supplies, and Your Majesty refused to give them. As a prince, Pang Xiao had no choice but to think of such an unorthodox way. Lord Chen even had a disrespectful thought for a moment. Your Majesty couldn't be purposely delaying the supply of food to force Wang Yi to do such a thing and take advantage of the opportunity to punish him, right? As soon as the thought appeared, Lord Chen shook his head and denied it. Your Majesty is the ruler of a country, so he shouldn't be so afraid of a meritorious official, right? If he doesn't even have the magnanimity to forgive others, how can the people have a good life in the future? Pang Xiao saw that Lord Chen was lost in thought and couldn't help but smile and shake his head. This Lord Chen was one of the few officials that Pang Xiao had seen in recent years who was so naive. After making up his mind, Pang Xiao's face immediately darkened. He called for Huzi to come in. "Go, pick 100 guards. We're going to Minhui village to pay a visit to Squire Liu." Huzi immediately complied and quickly went to make the arrangements. Pang Xiao also strode out of the room. Magistrate Chen was stunned for a moment, but then he quickly chased after him. "Wang Yi, this official will go with you." Pang Xiao smiled and shook his head. He patted Magistrate Chen's shoulder and said, "There's no need. Magistrate Chen still needs to oversee Golden Harbor. No matter what happens in the future, this king believes that as long as Lord Chen is here, the people of Golden Harbor will have hope of survival." He spoke as if Pang Xiao was going to a dragon's lair or a tiger's den. Lord Chen said anxiously, "Wang Yi, this won't do. We were the ones who came up with the idea, but you're the only one who's going to take the lead at this critical moment. What kind of person am I? Don't worry, even if Your Majesty blames me, this official will shoulder the blame with you. I definitely won't let you take the blame." Pang Xiao cherished Lord Chen's sincerity even more after hearing his words. He smiled and persuaded, "Lord Chen, this king is Your Majesty's special envoy for disaster relief. This king is the one who should take the lead. You're the pillar of support for the people of Golden Harbor. At this time, Golden Harbor must not fall into chaos. So you and I should go our separate ways. Wang Yi. Lord Chen was moved and his eyes reddened. Pang Xiao smiled and said, "Don't worry, Lord Chen. This king knows his limits and won't harm innocent people. This king won't use force this time either. He's just trying to be polite before resorting to force." In fact, the guards of the prince's mansion were all experts. How could an ordinary country squire resist the elites of Jinghu Wei? Pang Xiao brought few but elite guards with him. Their imposing manner was enough to overwhelm anyone. There was no need to be afraid of violence. Pang Xiao sent someone to inform Qin Yining and then brought Huzi and the others to Hui Minute village. When Qin Yining heard that Pang Xiao brought people to Hui Minute village, he couldn't help but sigh. I guess that he would find a way to solve the famine. But this trip will be very dangerous. It will be easy for people to talk about it. Chapter 11-13. Qin Yining shook her head. She casually fiddled with the green jade gourd on her skirt. She turned around and slowly walked in with Ji Yun and Bing Tang. These days, Golden Harbor's food was tight. However, Pang Xiao couldn't bear to let Qin Yining starve. Pang Xiao had porridge for every meal. Qin Yining ate better than Pang Xiao. Every time there was porridge, Pang Xiao would scoop the dry porridge for Qin Yining. Qin Yining didn't have a big appetite and deliberately saved a little. However, every meal, Pang Xiao would eat the leftovers from Qin Yining. If the masters were like this, the rest of the people were in similar situations. Ji Yun, Bing Tang, and the others felt their hearts ache when they saw this. They wished they could contribute their own food as well. However, Qin Yining rejected them every time and watched them eat. Every time, she would tell them, "Now is not the time to enjoy. It's fine as long as we can survive." They were touched by a master who was so considerate of them. Therefore, the food crisis became a heavy burden on everyone's heads. Wang Yi really didn't have any other choice. The situation in Golden Harbor City is still considered good. The situation outside the city is even worse. Magistrate Chen has sent people out to check the situation every day and gather the dead people to deal with them. He's afraid that there will be an epidemic, Ji Yun said. Bing Tang sighed and said, "But the people live in such an atmosphere and watch their relatives and friends die every day. Even if they survive in the future, I'm afraid they will have a mental breakdown." The few of them returned to their rooms. Qin Yining sat down on the warm Kang bed with a thick eiderdown cushion by the window. He sighed and said, "Now, we can only try our best to let more people live. Only by living can we have emotions. As for whether our hearts can accept it, we can only leave it to time." This topic was too heavy. The few of them didn't speak for a while. Qin Yining propped her chin up and looked out the half-open window. A few yellow leaves fell and landed on the tidy bluestone tiles. At this moment, she saw a person walk over quickly, stepping over a few fallen leaves on the ground. Princess Consort. It was Liao Zhibing. When she saw that it was Liao Zhibing, Qin Yining stood up immediately. Her vision went dark for a moment, and she immediately held onto the table for support. Ji Yun and Bing Tang hurriedly supported Qin Yining. "Wang Fei, please stand up slowly." "I'm fine." Qin Yining walked quickly to the door. "Mr. Liao, how is it?" Liao Zhibing smiled and said, "Fortunately, I didn't let you down. The first batch of treasures has been exchanged for gold, silver, and banknotes. Princess Consort, should I order someone to bring these things in?" Qin Yining thought for a moment and said with a smile, "No, we'll attract too much attention if we enter the city. Let's immediately take these treasures to Hui Minute village." Wang Yi went to visit Squire Liu today. In order to avoid being mistaken as a bandit, we'd better go there as soon as possible. Hearing this, everyone could not help but chuckle. When Liao Zhibing found out that his group had arrived in time, he was very happy and hurriedly went to make arrangements. Qin Yining ordered someone to prepare a carriage. With Bing Tang and Ji Yun, they left the Yamen under the protection of Jing Zhe and the other 3 secret agents. The weather was getting colder, and the streets were bleak. There was not a single person to be seen. The desolate scene made people feel depressed. When they exited the city, They saw County Magistrate Chen ordering people to set up a porridge stall for disaster relief from afar. Seeing the dark mass of people, Qin Yining felt a chill run down his spine. If they did not handle this properly, they would not be able to get food. Who knew how many of these people would die? Thinking of this, Qin Yining's expression became resolute. He ordered his men to hurry. This time, Liao Zhibing was working with several Jinghu Wei. These people had followed Qin Yining to Water Zi country before, so they were all familiar faces. When they saw each other, they felt a bit closer. When these people bowed to Qin Yining, they also felt a bit closer and more casual. The group of people rushed to Hui Minute village at top speed and arrived at their destination not long after. There was only one wide street in the entire village. On both sides of the street, there were rows upon rows of houses and courtyards. At this time, all of the houses were white. It was also autumn, so the bleak scene made people feel that it was very bleak. However, there was one house that stood out from the rest. It was like a crane in a flock of chickens. Just by looking at the courtyard, one could tell that it was twice the height of a normal house's courtyard. There were even high observation platforms at the four corners. Although the building was not very exquisite, it looked more imposing than a normal house. With such a clear target, it saved them a lot of time to find it. Qin Yining led his men in the direction of the courtyard. Not long after, they saw 100 guards from the Wang estate standing in a neat formation outside the courtyard. The courtyard door was wide open. Pang Xiao was talking to an old man in his 60s, who was wearing a sapphire blue robe with wide sleeves. The old man's attitude was neither servile nor overbearing. This old man can understand that Wang Yi is doing this for the sake of the people. But look, this old man has dozens of people at home. Besides, the food in my hands did not come from the wind. Wang Yi is a benevolent and righteous person. He assists your majesty and cares for the people. He is much more benevolent and righteous than the incapable ruler of the previous dynasty. Now that Wang Yi has brought so many people to block this old man's door, what do you think this old man should do? These words seemed to be spoken without any rhyme or reason, but in fact, he was using both the carrot and the stick. If the person in front of him was really unreasonable, he might have directly punished the old man for his disrespect. However, Pang Xiao was not such a person. It seemed that the old man had seen through Pang Xiao's character, which was why he dared to speak like this. Pang Xiao smiled. When he heard the sound of footsteps and carriages, he turned around and saw Qin Yining lifting the curtain of the carriage and looking at him. When he saw Liao Zhibing and several carriages behind Qin Yining, he immediately understood. His darling was afraid that he would not be able to move an inch without money and would be labeled as a bandit for no reason. Pang Xiao originally did not intend to rob, but seeing the people in the city dying one by one and your majesty not responding, he could not bear to see so many people starve to death. Before the treasure arrived, he wanted to buy it on credit and solve the urgent problem first. However, this Squire Liu was a cunning old fox. He was not moved by force or persuasion. It was useless to persuade him with emotion. If he spoke more harshly, he would lie down on the ground and threaten Pang Xiao, saying that he was abusing the common people. Pang Xiao's attitude softened a little and he showed the same face as before. Pang Xiao was even thinking about whether or not to pressure him, but Qin Yining just happened to arrive at this time. Pang Xiao said, "This king understands Squire Liu's meaning. This king is just a boorish man and does not dare to compare himself with others. This king does not want to rob you of the grain. He has been standing here for so long to discuss the price with you. Squire Liu is a smart man. You should know that this king's patience is very limited, right?" Squire Liu saw this and could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. He thought about what he had just said and could not help but break out in a cold sweat. Pang Xiao continued, "This year's season is not good. The heavens are not willing to fulfill the people's wishes. The people have been hungry for so long that I'm afraid they have already lost their patience. The imperial court is saying that even the cleverest housewife cannot cook without rice, but the rice is here with you. What do you think will happen if people find out that you have so much food in your hands?" Squire Liu's face turned pale. It was true that he had food in his hands, but he didn't dare to tell anyone about it. Even the guards at home might not know what was stored in his warehouse. In this world, the one with the bigger fist had the final say. If Prince Jeongshiren ordered people to rob him, or if he spread the news, he was afraid that even the starving people would rob his house clean before the Prince Jeongshiren sent people. At that time, his whole family might be killed. Squire Liu's face scrunched up as he thought this through. Pang Xiao saw that he was finally afraid and said, "Squire Liu, you don't need to be nervous. This king is just stating the facts and has no other meaning. In the end, this king is here today to buy grain. This king will not ask Squire Liu to sell at a price, but as a citizen of Daju, seeing so many people starve to death, Squire Liu should think about the price. Don't worry, as long as the price is right, this king will immediately send people to deliver the money. He will not delay the payment and will not rob you of the grain." Liu Yuanwei saw that Pang Xiao had been standing there and talking with him for a long time. If it was someone with a bad temper or a domineering personality, perhaps the soldiers and horses would have already rushed in while they were talking. Thinking of this, Squire Liu said, "Wang Yi, don't blame me. This old man has no choice. You see, there are so many people in my house. Moreover, we are really short of grain now. This old man can't sell all the grain to you. Wang Yi, please understand." "Not at all." Pang Xiao waved his hand and said, "You just have to say the price." Squire Liu thought for a moment and then pointed a few fingers at Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao couldn't help but sneer inwardly. It seems that this king didn't tell Squire Liu everything. Or perhaps, Squire Liu still can't figure it out. Pang Xiao looked around and sighed. It's so comfortable to live here with mountains and rivers. It's a pity that the year is not good and there are more and more hungry people. Many bandits are hiding in some mountain. It's really worrying. Squire Liu looked at Pang Xiao's eyes that contained a biting cold murderous intent and immediately realized his mistake. He quickly withdrew 2 fingers. "Wang Yi, it can't be any lower. If it's any lower, this old man will lose money. Think about it, how long has it been raining? The price of grain changes day by day. You have to be considerate of this old man." Pang Xiao saw that his threat was effective. Squire Liu's face turned pale and his head was covered with cold sweat. His trembling lips loosened and he couldn't help but laugh inwardly. On the surface, Pang Xiao still looked solemn and didn't speak. Jinghu Wei, who had accompanied him, saw this and immediately came forward to say, "Wang Yi, you see, Squire Liu doesn't sincerely want to do business with you. Why don't you ask the Liu family who has more grain nearby? You can leave it here and talk about it later." "Talk about it later?" Squire Liu was so scared that his hair stood on end. He stared nervously at Pang Xiao and clenched his teeth as he withdrew 1 finger. "Wang Yi, please do me a favor. It really can't be any lower. You can't say that you're here to sell grain and expect this old man to give you money, right? How dare you?" Jingzhe listened for a long time and immediately stepped forward and shouted, "How dare you be so rude to Wang Yi? Don't you want your head? Wang Yi, what's the price? Tell me a price." Squire Liu almost covered his head and hid. Chapter 11:14. Squire Liu's heart resisted. At this critical juncture, he would be harming whoever he recommended. Wouldn't those people hate him to death after this matter? But in line with the principle of sacrificing friends is better than sacrificing oneself, Squire Liu's voice trembled as he mentioned 2 families. Pang Xiao nodded and said with a smile, "Squire Liu is indeed a sensible person. Then let's follow Squire Liu's request. This amount." Pang Xiao raised a finger. Squire Liu wanted to cry on the spot. He raised a hand, but in the end, he was so scared that he retreated and only dared to raise a finger. Chen Sui Wang Yi actually had the nerve to say follow his request. How could this Wang Yi be so thick-skinned? But Squire Liu didn't dare to say this out loud. His initial arrogance had long been shattered by fear. The troops and horses were placed in front of his door. He also realized that Wang Yi wasn't easy to get along with. Giving him money was giving him face, so it was better to stop while he was ahead. Once Squire Liu gave the order, the residents became busy. Pang Xiao ordered people to guard here and immediately sent people to inquire about the situation of the two families that Squire Liu mentioned. He turned around and went to the carriage. Bing Tang and Ji Yun immediately got off. Pang Xiao lifted the curtain and jumped into the carriage. He sat down next to Qin Yining. Why did it come in such a timely manner? Otherwise, we would be treated as bandits. Qin Yining was amused by him and laughed. Didn't you already plan to put it on credit? Anyway, it will arrive in 2 days. She leaned close to him and looked at his sitting posture. She whispered, "Did you ride a horse? Does your wound hurt? How can you be so delicate?" Pang Xiao stretched out his long arm and put it around Qin Yining's shoulder. When he felt her delicate bones, he couldn't help but frown. These days, Qin Yining couldn't eat or sleep well. She was exhausted, so she lost a lot of weight. They were in the disaster area, and the people were facing the threat of death every day. They didn't even have enough food to eat, let alone recuperate. She had just gained some weight on her face, but she lost weight again when they reached Golden Harbor. Qin Yining leaned on his shoulder, her eyes bright like the stars in the night sky. "Thank you for thinking of such a good idea. We can't wait for your Majesty's relief. We can't watch the people starve to death. Maybe we can use this method on the way." Pang Xiao, she suddenly thought, and Saturday. And the treasure had always been a thorn in Li Qitian's heart. He had spent so much effort to find it, but he still hadn't found it. So, if Pang Xiao became suspicious of him, then Li Qitian was afraid that he would be attacked from both front and rear in the future. Pang Xiao loved to see the adorable look on her face when she was worried about him. It felt as if he was being patted by a soft and furry little animal with its furry little paw. "Okay, I'll do as you say. I'll try my best to be careful." Qin Yining heard his joyful voice and couldn't help but look up. She met his gentle eyes. Although he didn't do anything and just looked at her with eyes full of love, Qin Yining still felt her heart beat uncontrollably. It seemed that every time Pang Xiao looked at her with such gentle eyes, she almost forgot her name and what she wanted to do. Pang Xiao loved her misty eyes and couldn't help kissing her eyes. Just then, footsteps came from outside the carriage. "Wang Yi, I've ordered the grain. It's enough for the people inside and outside the city to eat porridge for 3 days. Pang Xiao happily pinched Qin Yining's face and said, "That old fox must have some grain that he hasn't taken out yet. I'll go and check again." Then he jumped off the carriage like a child, as if his wound didn't hurt at all. Qin Yining wrapped herself in a cloud shoulder and waited quietly. Pang Xiao talked with Squire Liu. When they returned to the city, they were followed by 6 carriages and dozens of porters. It was the same scene of devastation in autumn. It was enough to make people happy to bring back grain. Qin Yining didn't get out of the carriage. But when she lifted the curtain and saw the people outside the city looking at Pang Xiao with expectant eyes, she felt a strong sense of satisfaction. It was worth it to use the treasure here. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining first sent part of the grain to the porridge stalls outside the city and arranged for people to cook porridge. Then they quickly returned to the city to make arrangements. They were so fast that they didn't have time to inform Magistrate Chen when they returned to the city. They sent the grain to the 2 porridge stalls in the city first, thinking that the sooner the starving people could eat the grain, the fewer people who would die. When Magistrate Chen heard that Pang Xiao really brought the grain back to the porridge stalls, he immediately rushed over. Seeing the smoke rising from the stove and the thick mixed rice porridge in the big pot, the people had already lined up in front of the porridge stalls with clay pots and big bowls. Magistrate Chen was so excited that he almost burst into tears. "Wang Yi, thanks to you. I thank you on behalf of the people in the city." Magistrate Chen strode forward and knelt in front of Pang Xiao, kowtowing several times. When the people who were closer heard Magistrate Chen's words, they all knelt down and kowtowed in excitement. The crowd was talking about how it was all thanks to the food that the prince had brought for them to survive these few days. The commoners also followed Magistrate Chen and knelt down. Their voices of thanks to Pang Xiao resounded through the sky. Pang Xiao quickly helped Magistrate Chen up. "Magistrate Chen, what are you doing? This is this king's duty. This king is incompetent and caused everyone to suffer from hunger for no reason. This king is really ashamed. Wang Yi, please don't say that. Your Majesty didn't give the grain, but Wang Yi isn't a god. Do you think he can make the grain appear out of nowhere? If Wang Yi didn't use his own money to buy the grain this time, everyone wouldn't have survived. Magistrate Chen was a straightforward person and said whatever came to his mind in his excitement. After he said it, he realized what he had said and immediately felt that it was inappropriate. After all, Your Majesty didn't give the grain. It was too easy to cause gossip. But on second thought, Your Majesty was the Son of Heaven, but Your Majesty didn't even do as well as Wang Yi. Since he dared to do it, why would he be afraid of others talking behind his back? On the other hand, Prince Zhongshiren was amiable and kind, and kept a low profile. He had asked just now and found out that the grain was bought by Wang Yi. He spoke harshly, but when he went to Squire Liu's house, he only scared them a little and paid them in the end. Wang Yi was willing to use his private money to buy the grain for the sake of the people's survival when Your Majesty didn't give the grain. Wang Yi didn't publicize such a noble character, but Magistrate Chen couldn't let this matter be suppressed. Sure enough, when Magistrate Chen said this, the people immediately began to talk about it. This news was pushed away by the tide and soon the crowd was full of praises from the people. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining looked at each other helplessly. They had been keeping a low profile so that people wouldn't think too much about it. The current situation wasn't so bad because Wang Yi had some money to use, so it wasn't eye-catching. But they planned to provide relief all the way to the south. That would be a huge sum of money. At that time, it was hard to guarantee that no one would think too much about it. If they talked to Li Qitian, Pang Xiao wouldn't be able to explain it clearly. Therefore, Pang Xiao, Qin Yining, Xu Weiji, Xie Yu, and other strategists had been hesitating about how to publicize it. They could let Pang Xiao win the hearts of the people and prevent Li Qitian from being suspicious. But who would have thought that their plans couldn't keep up with the changes? Before they could think of a solution, Magistrate Chen had already made a decision for them. Seeing Pang Xiao's awkward expression, Magistrate Chen thought that Wang Yi's personality was like this and didn't want to be in the limelight for this kind of thing. In his heart, he had a better impression of this young Wang Yi. He increasingly felt that it was a loss for Wang Yi to keep a low profile after doing such a good deed. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining saw that under Magistrate Chen's arrangement, the people were orderly. The young and strong people didn't squeeze in front because they were strong. Instead, they modestly let the elderly, children, and women go first. Although everyone was starving, they didn't lose their manners and bottom line. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao were very happy. They couldn't help but feel that the Golden Harbor under Magistrate Chen's administration was indeed different from the places they had seen when they came. They didn't know if it was because it was near the coast and the disaster was less severe. More importantly, the people here were simple and honest. Everyone still retained their kindness. It was already difficult for a magistrate to maintain the stability of a place. What was even more valuable was that he kept the hearts of the people simple and honest. There wasn't any bad atmosphere, even under the shadow of death. This was Magistrate Chen's ability. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining returned to the Yamen to rest temporarily. When Xie Yu, Xu Weiji, and other strategists heard the news, they walked around with their guards to check the situation in the city. The people all knew that the food was bought for them by Prince Zhongshiren with his own money. Now that they could eat the hot porridge, they felt that it was more expensive than any other delicacy. When they thought of Wang Yi, they praised him even more. Even Pang Xiao's heroic deeds on the battlefield were mentioned. This made the strategists who came out to check the situation feel honored. They were extremely proud and moved. The strategists who initially opposed Pang Xiao using the treasure to help the victims finally understood what Xie Yu and Xu Weiji meant when they said that the world belongs to the one who wins the hearts of the people. There were also people who thought that it was fortunate that Wang Yi didn't take their advice at that time. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao returned to their room. Ji Yun and Bing Tang soon brought over a pot of mixed grain porridge. Pang Xiao picked up a bowl and scooped a spoonful. He pursed his lips and said, "It's really not easy. I can finally eat something dry." Qin Yining was amused by his aggrieved and sad appearance. "Eat more. I still have to trouble you to look for food and negotiate the price." Pang Xiao laughed loudly. He scooped out a bowl of porridge filled with rice grains and handed it to Qin Yining. Then he held the remaining porridge in the pot. Chapter 11:15. Qin Yining ate half a bowl of rice and poured the remaining half of the rice directly into the crock that Pang Xiao was holding. Then, he picked up the white porcelain cup and rinsed his mouth. Pang Xiao frowned and said, "Why are you eating so little? Now that we have food, you don't have to be like before. I'm a man. I'll be fine even if I don't eat or drink for a few days. But look at how thin you are." As he spoke, he scooped some porridge for Qin Yining. However, Qin Yining shook his head and said, "I really can't eat anymore. Maybe it's because I'm used to eating less these days. It's not easy to eat so much. We'll have more and more food in the future. Are you afraid that I won't be able to eat well? When I'm better, I'll ask Bing Tang to cook medicinal porridge for me." When Pang Xiao heard this, he felt a little better. However, the thick porridge that he had just eaten had lost its taste at this time. He really didn't want Qin Yining to suffer with her anymore, but every time it happened, it always gave him a hard blow. He even wondered if he had done something wrong to end up in such a state. Qin Yining saw that Pang Xiao was eating absent-mindedly. He didn't need to think carefully to know what he was thinking about again. She leaned forward and hugged his arm. She rested her chin on his shoulder and tilted her head to look into his eyes. As soon as she came over, Pang Xiao came back to his senses. When he saw that she was clinging to him like a soft and cute kitten, his heart almost melted. For such a good sister Yi, he could make decisions that he didn't want to make. Pang Xiao pressed his face against hers and finished the porridge almost fiercely. He called Bing Tang to the side and whispered to her to Qin Yining's body. Then, he hurried out again. Bing Tang and Ji Yun came into the room and called Ziyuan and Smile to come in and clean up. Then, they chatted with Qin Yining. Wang Yi looked a little scary just now. It was as if someone had angered him. Ji Yun still had lingering fears. Bing Tang shook his head with a smile. Wang Yi is clearly worried about Princess Consort. Qin Yining tightened his collar and smiled faintly. He's always making a big fuss over nothing. How is this making a fuss over nothing? Bing Tang smiled as he pulled Qin Yining's hand over and placed his finger on her neck. Wang Yi's heart aches for a while when he sees you lose a strand of hair. He feels that he didn't protect you well. Now that you've lost so much weight and your complexion doesn't look good, you've been starving with him all day long. How can he not feel heartache? Ji Yun nodded repeatedly. Not to mention Pang Xiao, even Tang Xiu had secretly sent her dry rations several times. He had saved them from the rations. When she thought of Tang Xiu, Ji Yun's face turned a little red. Qin Yining saw that Bing Tang was checking her pulse and smiled without saying anything. How could she not understand Pang Xiao's intentions? But this was the current situation. Everyone was already very satisfied that they could survive. It wasn't as if she hadn't experienced a famine before. The hardship was only temporary. Bing Tang touched Qin Yining's hands and shook his head. Princess Consort has eaten too little and is worried too much. That's why she's so weak. You have to listen to this servant. Nothing is more important than your own health. Not for anything else, but for Brother Zhao and Brother Han. Let me tell you, if you have so much on your mind all day, you'll grow old very quickly. Don't let the children not recognize you the next time you see the two young masters. Bing Tang was exaggerating a little. He wanted to use the two children to stimulate Qin Yining so that she wouldn't neglect her own health. But when Qin Yining heard this, his heart skipped a beat. They hadn't seen each other for so long. The children were still young when they left. When the world was peaceful, who knew how long it would take for them to reunite? At that time, the children might not recognize her. What's more, their current situation was so tense that it wasn't certain if they could keep their lives. If something went wrong, they might not be able to see each other again. Thinking of this, Qin Yining's eyes turned red. Bing Tang was frightened by Qin Yining's appearance and quickly said, "Princess Consort, please forgive this servant. This servant was just afraid that you would be depressed. This servant was just joking. Please don't take it seriously." "That's right, Princess Consort. You still don't know Bing Tang. This girl loves to frighten people. As a doctor, in order to treat people, they're afraid that the patient won't listen to them. They always scare people. Ji Yun secretly gave Bing Tang a look to quickly persuade her. She knew that Princess Consort was thinking about the children all day, but she couldn't show it in front of Wang Yi. It was true that there wasn't enough food in the disaster area. Li Chitian was pressuring them step by step. The situation was tense, but who could say that Qin Yining's worry and depression wasn't because of the children? This girl, Bing Tang, was too reckless. Qin Yining saw that the two were very nervous and said with a smile, "What are you doing? I know you're doing this for my own good." Bing Tang is right. Even if it's for Zhao Jie and Han Jie, I have to be alert. That's right, Bing Tang nodded, there's still a long road to the south. If you're like this now, how will you have the strength to help Wang Yi in the future? Qin Yining smiled and nodded in agreement. Next time, I'll try to eat more. Bing Tang smiled and said, in a moment, Newbie will give you a few needles to disperse the depression. The three chatted for a while and then took out needles and thread to do it. In the next few days, Pang Xiao was as busy as a spinning top. He didn't just buy food from the nearby areas, he also planned the route to the south in advance. He chose the towns they would pass through on the way and ordered people to investigate the situation of the disaster, the situation of the local officials, and whether there were any people in the surrounding areas who were stockpiling food to make money from the disaster. All of this had to be clearly shown on the maps that the scouts carried. Qin Yining followed Bing Tang's instructions and gradually increased her appetite. Maybe it was because she was more determined, her entire body seemed to be filled with energy. When she had nothing to do, she would take people to the porridge stalls in and outside the city to help. Wang Yi paid out of his own pocket for everyone to eat their fill. Wang Fei, a beauty that was carved out of jade, mixed in with the porridge stalls every day to do some rough and tiring work. Sometimes, she would organize the men who had eaten their fill to go into the city to repair the houses and build shacks. When the weather turned cold, it would be easier to take in the disaster victims from other places. The fact that Wang Yi and Wang Fei were doing this personally was truly moving. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining's reputation in the vicinity of Jingang was even greater than before. When people mentioned this couple, they would give a thumbs up in praise. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. The relief from the court still had not arrived, but the people of Jingang saw hope for survival. And this was all brought to them by Prince Zhongshiren. Wang Yi, these days, it is all thanks to you and Wang Fei. The people of Jingang have been settled, and the disaster victims from other places have been properly taken in and recorded. Everyone only saved a little this winter, but they will be able to survive. This is all thanks to you. If you are leaving now, this official and the people of Jingang will not bear to part with you. Magistrate Chen's words came from the bottom of his heart and moved everyone. Hearing this, the eyes of the surrounding people couldn't help but heat up. Pang Xiao said with a smile, "This king is under orders to provide relief and cannot stay in one place. There are many places in the south that need this king. Magistrate Chen is a thoughtful person, and is very capable. He is devoted to the people and will have great accomplishments in the future. This king is very reassured to leave Jingang in Magistrate Chen's hands." County Magistrate Chen blushed from the praise. For him, Pang Xiao was a prince with a high position and authority, who commanded troops like a god, and who also had a noble character. For him to be praised by Pang Xiao made him feel even better than being praised for his achievements. Saying goodbye to Magistrate Chen, Pang Xiao followed the original plan and left with Qin Yining. But when they came out of the city gates, they saw the people as thin as sticks on both sides of the road. The autumn wind was very cold. The disaster victims were wearing thin clothing, but they all stretched their necks to look at the city gates. No one wanted to leave first. Seeing Pang Xiao's group come out of the city gates, someone in the crowd said, they're coming. Then, someone took the lead and everyone knelt down and shouted, "Long live Wang Yi." Some people were so grateful that they couldn't speak and cried, thanking Wang Yi for saving their lives. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao sat side by side in the carriage. Hearing the shocking cheers and seeing such a warm scene, the two of them were very moved. At this time, The strategists who followed Pang Xiao also felt honored. They felt that following such a benevolent and wise master was the best choice. Because Pang Xiao was already prepared, although the rest of the relief journey was bumpy, everything was under Pang Xiao's control. But when Pang Xiao's group came to the next city, Li Qitian in the capital also received news from Jin Gang. He's selling the food himself. Li Qitian angrily slammed the booklet on the table. So he's showing off his benevolence and righteousness. All the land under the heavens belongs to the king. We are the ruler of the world. We don't even have anywhere to sell our money. How could he have any? Xiong Jinshui lowered his eyes and tried his best to reduce his presence. The other servants in the imperial study also lowered their heads, afraid that they would become the next target of your majesty's anger. Li Qitian angrily paced back and forth. Taitan's war situation was tense, and Gao Wenliang was useless. The same tiger army was not able to display even a tenth of its strength under Gao Wenliang's command. Ji Ziyu gritted his teeth and persevered. But at the end of the day, the soldiers' pay could not keep up. How much could they display when they were hungry? But Taitan had Lu Heng's support. Sai Qin himself was cunning. With the addition of the fox-like Lu Heng and the financial support of the Lu family, this war was really too difficult. Xiong Jinshui. This servant is here. Xiong Jinshui could not avoid it. He lowered his head and bowed. Li Qitian said, "Go and call Lei Guaneng and Song Deqiu over." "As you wish." Xiong Jinshui immediately responded and rushed to find the two officials. Pang Xiao stayed here. Qin Yining came to a new city. He found that the impact of what official Chen said that day had spread far and wide. Qin Yining was a little worried. The people trust you and think highly of you. These are all good things. But I am still a little worried. I want the reputation, but I don't want the emperor to be suspicious of where your money came from. What if he doesn't say that it's a treasure, but instead accuses you of being greedy all these years? Pang Xiao nodded. These are all possible. But fortunately, Teacher Xie thought of a good idea. What idea? Qin Yining was curious. Chapter 11:16. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh when he saw him like this. Sure enough, no matter how old a man was, he had a childlike side to him. Even Pang Xiao, who had a calm and meticulous personality, was no exception. The procession slowly approached Shuanan City, and the scene before them was even more miserable than when they were at Golden Harbor. The closer they got to the old capital of Dian, the more serious the disaster became. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining were no longer in the mood to chat, and each of them looked out of the window at the densely packed areas of the disaster victims. They found that there were less than 1 out of 10 middle-aged and elderly people left, and there were also very few children. Most of the survivors were young and strong men, and only a small number of women were left. In the face of a natural disaster, a strong man had more ability to survive than a weak woman. As for the elderly and children, if they didn't have a family to take care of them, they wouldn't be able to withstand such a disaster. Qin Yining's expression was heavy. When the disaster victims saw Pang Xiao's relief team arrive, their numb faces turned to look at them. When they saw the guards of the prince's mansion transporting the fully loaded carriages, the disaster victims all stood up. Their eyes were filled with desire. It was unknown who shouted, "It's Wang Yi who has come to provide relief." The originally lifeless disaster victims suddenly seemed to have been injected with vitality, and like flowing water, they rushed over to the city gate where the convoy was located. Pang Xiao hurriedly got off the carriage and ordered Jinghu Wei to surround the convoy. He walked side by side with Mu Jinghu to where the Wang Fu guards were at the outermost periphery of the encirclement. He cupped his hands and said to the disaster victims surrounding them, "Everyone, please calm down. This king will immediately order people to set up a porridge stall, and you will be able to eat hot porridge soon." Originally, the disaster victims didn't believe the rumors in the north. In their impression, the imperial court had always been slow in providing relief. Otherwise, in such a long time, when they rushed from various places to the big city, who knew how many of their family members and fellow villagers had starved to death on the way? If there was an official who was willing to be so straightforward, so many people wouldn't have died for nothing. Now, seeing Prince Zhongshiren being so straightforward, and the bodyguards who came with him were happily unloading food from the carriages, everyone became excited. The rumors were true. Looking at the food, the disaster victims in the front row could no longer hold back. Pang Xiao had seen a lot of looting victims along the way. With a wave of his hand, the bodyguards of the prince's mansion immediately took a step forward and raised their weapons horizontally, keeping the commoners outside the encirclement. Pang Xiao said in a clear voice, "Don't worry, everyone. This king has brought enough food for everyone to eat. If someone disobeyed the order now, they would be delaying the relief. If everyone fought over the food, when would the porridge be ready? Smart people will help set up the stoves and carry the rations, not cause trouble." The disaster victims, whose eyes had turned red after seeing the food, were still unable to control themselves. However, they were afraid of the swords in the hands of the prince's mansion's personal guards, so they did not dare to act rashly. There were also some people who heard Pang Xiao's words and their rationality prevailed. They spontaneously told the people around them to maintain order. There were also a few young people who stood out and volunteered to help. Pang Xiao nodded with satisfaction. His men organized the disaster victims to find a place to set up a stove. With someone leading the way, there were disaster victims who could still work who stood out to help. The order outside the city gate was immediately restored. Pang Xiao returned to the carriage. Qin Yining was looking out of the window. When he saw Pang Xiao coming over, he gave him a thumbs up, causing Pang Xiao to laugh uncontrollably. When they arrived at the city gate, Xie Yu and Xu Weiji led people to post a notice. Qin Yining was very curious. He got off the carriage to take a look, only to see a list of sponsors on the notice. The wording was simple. It praised the rich merchants who sold the food to Pang Xiao along the way. However, it did not say that they sold the food, but sponsored the food. By changing the words, even the meaning had changed. In the blink of an eye, the people who profited from the national disaster became great philanthropists. Qin Yining turned to look at Pang Xiao and could not help but laugh. This is the idea that Mr. Xie came up with, right? That's right. Pang Xiao smiled and nodded. Qin Yining praised, Mr. Xie is really quick-witted. He understands people's hearts very well. In this way, won't those merchants take the initiative to contact Wang Yi? They won't take less money, and they can also gain a good reputation as a family of good deeds. Qin Yining did not say another thing in front of everyone. This method would also hide how much money Pang Xiao used. If people asked, they could say that someone sponsored the food. In any case, in front of Li Chitian, no matter how much kindness and loyalty Pang Xiao had, he would be misunderstood. He would be accused even if he did not have any crimes. Right now, he just needed to stop people from talking. And this excuse could not only distract people's attention, but it could also arouse their enthusiasm. Why not? Pang Xiao's group had just entered the city when Huzi, who had been sent to purchase the food, came over with his men. Wang Yi, the food is being transported here. This is the account book, he said as he presented a blue booklet with both hands. Pang Xiao did not even look at it. Keep it. Don't lose it. Huzi knew that Pang Xiao trusted him. This account book could be said to be the evidence that Pang Xiao used the treasure. The total amount of food and supplies purchased in the book added up to a huge amount. Huzi smiled and nodded. He put the account book into his pocket. He smiled mischievously, but his eyes were very serious. Don't worry, Mr. Xie. I would rather lose my head than lose this account book. Pang Xiao slapped his forehead. Nonsense. Huzi rubbed his forehead. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Bing Tang behind Qin Yining. He laughed even more foolishly. Even the tips of his ears turned red. The Bing Tang also blushed and lowered his head. Qin Yining could not help laughing when he saw this. He followed Pang Xiao to see the local county magistrate. Pang Xiao found a way to gather food and supplies. The disaster relief went very smoothly. As they traveled in the direction of the old capital, the disaster victims were all very grateful to Pang Xiao. Prince Zhongshiren's reputation among the people was unparalleled. When the disaster relief arrived at the old capital of Dian, it was already the first month of the 9th year of Shengchang. The caravan came through the snow. Before they even reached the city gates, there were already disaster victims waiting to greet them. Prince Zhongshiren is here. Wang Yi brought food to save us. Thank you, Wang Yi. Thank you, Princess. Wang Yi is our benefactor. Back then, when the earthquake happened, it was Wang Yi who came to save us. Now that there is a disaster, it is Wang Yi who came to save us. You don't know this, but Princess Consort had already arranged for people to come and save us. When the flood started last year, the shopkeepers under Princess Consort had already saved many people and brought them to her farmstead. There were even people who specially taught them how to cultivate terraced fields. Otherwise, we would have lost even more people this year. Wang Yi and Princess Consort are really good people. The common people discussed with each other, their gratitude evident in their words. It was unknown who shouted first, but soon, someone in the crowd shouted, "Long live the king! Long live Wang Yi!" This shout of "Long live" really shocked the elite tiger guards and strategists who came along with him. Only the Son of Heaven could say "Long live." If this spread to the capital, Pang Xiao would not be able to escape the label of treason. But other than the shock, those who sincerely followed Pang Xiao also felt proud. This was the wise ruler they followed. He had sacrificed a lot, but he had also received the love and respect of the people. These words came from the hearts of the people. No one had taught them to say it. At this moment, even the followers who had been hungry all along the way and had to gather food were satisfied. They felt that everything was worth it. The strategists, led by Xie Yu and Xu Weiji, had mixed feelings. Brother Xu, Brother Xie, if we had not listened to your suggestions back then, I'm afraid we would have made a big mistake. That's right. Although we were also thinking for Wang Yi, our knowledge was limited. The decision we made almost caused Wang Yi to miss a good opportunity. Looking at this scene now, I'm really afraid. Xie Yu and Xu Weiji said, "You flatter us, we don't dare." Xu Weiji said again, "Actually, everything came from Wang Yi's heart." At the beginning of the disaster relief, Wang Yi was wholeheartedly thinking for the people. He decided to take from the people and use for the people. If Wang Yi's heart was not for the people, even if you and I tried our best to persuade him, Wang Yi would not listen. Xie Yu also nodded and pointed to the sky. Isn't that person an example? When everyone thought of the Son of Heaven, they could not help but sigh. As the emperor, he can really be ruthless and not care about the lives of the people. Along the way, all the food was paid for by Wang Yi. The Son of Heaven actually gave 8 carriages to Wang Yi at the beginning and even set a trap for him. In these few months, Wang Yi saved so many people, but the Son of Heaven did not react at all. He did not give any money or food for the disaster relief. The strategists were furious when they thought of Li Qitian's actions. However, Xie Yu laughed heartily and pointed to the cheering people outside the carriage. "Is this what it means to reap what you sow?" When the strategists heard this, they also laughed heartily. Qin Yining wrapped herself in a large fur cloak and hugged the hand warmer that was already a bit cold. She was also a bit worried when she heard the cheers outside. This is a big city, so Li Qitian's spies must be here. Moreover, the magistrate of the city has just been appointed. Everyone we know has already been punished because of the disaster. We still don't know which side he is on. It won't be good if you are impeached by the emperor. Pang Xiao patted Qin Yining's shoulder and pinched her cold face. "All right, don't worry. I'll go out and say a few words. No matter what the people think, my stance must be clear." "That's right." Qin Yining nodded. Pang Xiao grabbed a large cloak and put it on, then ordered the carriage to stop outside. When the welcoming people saw the procession slowly come to a stop, they couldn't help but stop cheering. They saw a tall, imposing, and handsome man dressed in a black fur cloak disembark from the carriage. Pang Xiao stood in the open space and cupped his hands to the people around him, fellow villagers and elders. What virtue and ability does this prince have to bear the burden of receiving everyone's welcome in the snow? The people cheered when they heard this. The people of the old capital still remembered the days when they were under the rule of the Yang dynasty's Yuqi family. At that time, Prince Zhongshiren had led his troops to attack them. They were extremely terrified because of Wang Yi's fierce reputation. When people mentioned him, it was as if they had seen a demon. It was as if he could eat human flesh and drink human blood at any time. However, many years had passed. When they looked back, this Wang Yi had never massacred civilians during the war between the two countries. There were also people who had survived in Liang City and other places who tried to clear Wang Yi's name. There was no evidence to say that he had massacred the entire city. In order not to massacre the entire city, he had even defied the imperial edict and had his military power removed by the current emperor. He had to return to the capital to report on his work. When the two countries were at war, the Yuchi family naturally wouldn't speak well of the enemy. However, the eyes of the people were clear. When he attacked the city, he didn't massacre the poor. He even sent food to solve the famine after the drought in the old capital. Later, when the earthquake happened, he and the princess consort came to provide disaster relief. Before the flood, the princess consort had already ordered people to make preparations. Now, it was Wang Yi and the princess consort who came to provide disaster relief. It could be said that many years ago, Prince Zhongshiren's reputation as a demon embryo had been gradually erased. Now, his bravery, good fighting skills, benevolence, and love for the people had been widely spread. Chapter 11:17. His words made the excited commoners come back to their senses. Everyone was a little uneasy. Wang Yi was right. Only the emperor can say long live. They were so excited just now. If someone heard them and reported them to your majesty, they would be accused of treason. Seeing that everyone realized the seriousness of the matter, Pang Xiao explained, this king can understand everyone's excitement. After a long time of famine, they are naturally happy to see your majesty send food. What everyone wants to express is that your majesty cares about the commoners and long live your majesty. I think everyone can understand. With the way out, there was no lack of smart people in the crowd who nodded in agreement. Wang Yi is right. Everyone wants to say that your majesty is wise. It's all thanks to your majesty that we can survive. The commoners who came back to their senses also agreed. But facing Prince Zhongshiren, who gave them food and helped them cover up, the admiration and gratitude in their hearts were indescribable. The mountain was high and the road was long. The emperor didn't care about them. The one who really helped them was Wang Yi, who was wronged and suppressed. It was rumored that Prince Zhongshiren was stripped of his military power and official position. He was even publicly beaten by your majesty in the throne room for a groundless crime. Now, Wang Yi was still wholeheartedly speaking for your majesty and thinking for the commoners. Such a benevolent and righteous person's sincere heart was being trampled on. The commoners all felt that it wasn't worth it. Wang Yi. At this moment, the old capital's gates opened. A man who was about the same age as Pang Xiao, dressed in casual clothes and a dark grey cotton cloak, quickly walked in with a group of attendants. This official is the old capital's magistrate, Yun Yentsai. Greetings to Wang Yi. The people behind Yun Yentsai also bowed. Pang Xiao couldn't let the dignified magistrate bow. He hurriedly reached out to help him. Lord Yun, there's no need to be so polite. This king made a mistake and disrupted the order of the old capital. Please forgive him. A trace of surprise flashed across Yun Yentsai's eyes. Some said that Prince Zhongshiren killed people without batting an eyelid, while others praised him for loving the people like his own children. No matter how many rumors there were, they couldn't compare to seeing it for themselves. He didn't know about other things, but Wang Yi had a chance to be a human being. His reputation as a benevolent and righteous person might not be just an empty reputation. Now that he had met him, he realized that this person really knew how to conduct himself. He was a grand prince, yet he was treated so courteously in front of a mere magistrate. He gave him enough face and earned a good impression in front of the common people. The rumors were true. He was a wonderful person. Only then did Yun Yang respectfully return the greeting. He turned to the side and extended his hand to make an inviting gesture. He said with a smile, Wang Yi is truly too courteous. It is this official who has come late to welcome you. Wang Yi, please enter the city. Pang Xiao nodded and walked in front with Qin Yining. The group of people followed behind Pang Xiao and entered the old capital. Qin Yining looked at the familiar streets. After several wars and disasters, the old capital was no longer as prosperous as it was when she first returned to the Prime Minister's manor. Now it was the coldest time of the year. The falling snow covered the roofs, streets, and walls with a layer of white. Everything was grey and white, making people feel cold and lonely for no reason. Wang Yi, this official has already prepared the magistrate's yamen. I hope that you and Wang Fei will not mind. Will you move to the yamen to rest? Thank you for your kindness, official Yun. However, this king has already ordered people to come and make preparations. My humble wife's family has a residence here and hasn't lived in it for a long time. This king intends to accompany her back to take a look. I see. Wang Fei is from the old capital. This official has actually forgotten. Yun Yensai smiled and said, Wang Yi, if you have any orders, just say it. This official will definitely do it for you. Pang Xiao smiled, there's nothing else. Official Yun, please make the preparations. The provisions that this king ordered people to purchase in advance will arrive in the next 2 days. Use the provisions that this king brought to make porridge first. Let the people eat their fill first. There's no need to be too stingy with the provisions. There will be provisions delivered tomorrow anyway. Yun Yensai hurriedly nodded, yes, this official will do it right away. Pang Xiao thought for a moment and said, other than the fixed porridge stalls, such as the rundown temple in the city, the abandoned houses with no occupants have to be prepared with firewood for the refugees to keep warm. It's fine for the people who have homes in the old capital, but for the refugees from nearby, I'm afraid they won't even have a place to hide from the cold during the first month of the lunar year. Actually, before they arrived, a batch of corpses had already been disposed of in the city. The area in the outskirts of the city that was always filled with smoke and dust was the place where the corpses were burned. Just like when the Earth Dragon turned over in the past, the corpses could only be burned to prevent the epidemic. Fortunately, after the outbreak of the famine, it gradually entered a severe winter. If it had been in the middle of summer, the epidemic would have been even more troublesome in addition to the famine. Pang Xiao and Yun Yensai gave some instructions before heading to Qin Manor with Qin Yining. Yun Yensai had an advisor who was over 40 years old and dressed like a scholar beside him. He smiled and said, Official, what do you think of this Wang Yi? Is he really the same as what shopkeeper Qiu said? Regardless of whether he's the same or not, it doesn't seem like he's faking it for the sake of the people. If he's faking it, it really isn't easy for him to be able to act so realistically along the way. Yun Yensai led his subordinates to make preparations according to Pang Xiao's instructions. Qin Yining returned to Qin Manor with Pang Xiao. They were in Jing City, but Qin Yining did not forget to renovate this place. Although it had been destroyed and rebuilt several times, and had also experienced a famine, great shopkeeper Zhong had always been in the fields in the old capital. He would often come back to check on the people in the fields, and he would also have people carefully look after the houses. Therefore, when she and Pang Xiao returned, the manor was clean and tidy, as if they had just returned home less than 2 hours after leaving. The guards of the Wang Fu and Jinghu Wei stood in a line in front of the Fu gates. When Pang Xiao gave the order to open the door, the Fu gates were pushed open. Master Zhong came out with a group of familiar faces. He happily bowed to Qin Yining and Pang Xiao. Greetings to Wang Yi, greetings to Wang Fei. Master Zhong, please rise. Qin Yining hurried forward to support him. Then he nodded to the excited Lu Dehan, Liu Ju'er, and the others behind Master Zhong. He said with a smile, It is great that you are all here. Long time no see, how are you? Good, all good. It is all thanks to Wang Fei's care. We have worked on the fields, and Ning Garden has been planted with terraced fields. Even though the season is not good, it is self-sufficient and can support many people. Liu Ju'er still had a candid personality. She was not bashful when she saw Qin Yining. Lu Dehan saw Pang Xiao at the side. At first, he was slightly restrained, but since Liu Ju'er was so open, there was no reason for him to be cautious. Therefore, Lu Dehan also said bluntly, It is all thanks to Wang Fei and Master Zhong. In this period of time, not just the people on the fields, even the workers in Wang Fei's factories have been well taken care of. Qin Yining looked with a smile at Master Zhong, who was still hale and hearty despite the dust on his temples. He said with a smile, "I have been busy in Jing. The mountains are high and the road is long, so I have not been able to attend to this place. The factories have stopped working, and everyone has nowhere to go. It is all thanks to Master Zhong's help." Master Zhong smiled and raised his hands in a bow. "Before we came out, Wang Fei had given all the orders to this old man. The workers in the factories are mostly the victims of the disaster that had been saved in the past. There are also soldiers and their families who had been wounded in the war with Wang Yi. Everyone is grateful to Wang Yi and Wang Fei. Therefore, they are especially willing to listen to this old man and go wherever he is ordered. It is because Wang Yi and Wang Fei have built a good foundation that this old man can do things more easily." Qin Yining smiled and said, "You are still so modest." Master Zhong's face flushed slightly, but he was happy inside. After following Qin Yining for so many years and seeing her accomplish one thing after another, Master Zhong had never regretted it. He felt lucky that he had followed the right master. "Wang Yi, Wang Fei, the kitchen has already prepared food. It is a cold day, and you must be tired and cold from the journey. Why don't you go eat and rest first?" Pang Xiao and Qin Yining did not refuse. The Qin Fu was so large that it could accommodate all of them. Bing Tang, Ji Yun, Han Xiao, and Ziyuan followed Qin Yining and Pang Xiao to Snow Pear Courtyard. The rest of the people could live wherever they liked. Master Zhong helped Huzi and Tang Xiu make arrangements for the accompanying Jinghu Wei and the guards of the Wang Fu. He also made arrangements for the people of the Qingtian Alliance and the silver-masked secret agent. Everything was arranged properly, and Qin Yining did not have to worry about it. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao freshened up and changed into casual clothes. Then they went to the bright hall of Snow Pear Courtyard. A charcoal brazier was burning in the middle of the floor, and the room was as warm as spring. There were 3 small plates of pickled vegetables and a plate of salted fish on the table. The porridge was thick mixed rice porridge. The candlelight flickered. Under the warm light, everything appeared quiet and peaceful. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao sat down at the square table. He smiled and said, "When I was first brought back by father, I lived here." "I know." Pang Xiao picked up a piece of salted fish with the bones removed for Qin Yining. "After you returned to the Fu, you were bullied. I saw it all." Qin Yining thought of how Mother Jin had thrown him to the side of the bamboo forest to be cold. He could not help but laugh. Now that things have changed, and Mother Jin is no longer here. When I think of all the things that happened in the past, I can only sigh. The past cannot be chased. Pang Xiao ate a big mouthful of porridge and smiled. "But the future is promising." Qin Yining looked at Pang Xiao's beautiful eyes when she smiled. He also looked at the soft emotions that he only had when he was with her. He was very happy and moved. Yes, the future is promising. After the 2 of them finished eating, Ji Yun and Bing Tang came to clear the table and then left. They had all lived with Qin Yining in the Qin Fu before. Now, they felt like they had returned home. Their moods were relaxed, and even their footsteps were light. Pang Xiao pulled Qin Yining to the bedroom. The bedding on the bed was already made and covered with heated cobblestones. "Let's sleep for a while." Pang Xiao turned around and sat on the edge of the bed. He slowly unbuckled his belt and looked at Qin Yining, who was standing in front of him. His gaze was deep. Qin Yining blushed from his gaze and hurriedly pulled his hand that was taking off his outer robe. "Don't, it's still early." Pang Xiao raised his eyebrows. Chapter 11:18. When Pang Xiao heard this, he was stunned for a moment. It was as if he could not understand the meaning of Qin Yining's words. Seeing his silly look, Qin Yining smiled and shook his hand. "What's wrong? Sister Yi, do you mean that you might be pregnant?" His voice was a little hoarse. "That's not right." Bing Tang said that after he took that drug, he would not be able to get pregnant for at least 5 years. It might not be easy for him to recover in the future. He also said that his father-in-law might have been poisoned by that drug and could not have children for the rest of his life. It had only been 3 years. Could it be that his body was better and that the drug was no longer effective? Qin Yining raised his eyebrows and carefully observed his expression. It seemed that he was more shocked than surprised. Considering the current situation, it was indeed not the best time to have children. Qin Yining sighed softly and shook his head angrily. I'm not sure. Maybe it's because I haven't been resting well recently and I don't eat as well as before. My body has become weak and my period has been delayed. Pang Xiao suddenly came back to his senses. He was responsible for this. He felt that he did not have to worry about it after taking that drug, so he became more unscrupulous. Now, if she really was pregnant, he would not accept it or welcome it. How much of a jerk was he? Sister Yi, I was just too surprised. I thought you would have guessed. After all, you and I are both young and strong. Qin Yining's face was flushed, but he suddenly thought of something. Or do you know something and think that we won't have children? Pang Xiao's heart skipped a beat. His wife was too smart. He gave himself away with just one sentence. He was really overwhelmed. What do you mean? I just feel that the recent days have been too bumpy, so I didn't think too much about it. No. You must be hiding something from me. Qin Yining knew Pang Xiao too well. He could even see the slightest expression on his face. After thinking about it, he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Could it be that her body was damaged after giving birth to the twins, so she couldn't get pregnant? Pang Xiao didn't want to tell her because he was afraid that she would be sad. She was always with Bing Tang. She could just ask Bing Tang later. Forget it. It's just that my body isn't in harmony. That's not necessarily the case. Are you still going to patrol the city later? Seeing that Qin Yining had changed the topic, Pang Xiao knew that she must have misunderstood. He didn't know how many times he had cursed himself in his heart. Why did he turn into a fool when he was in front of his wife? He quickly pulled her into his arms and said anxiously, "We'll talk about the patrol later. Don't let your imagination run wild. Let's look for Bing Tang now." Qin Yining smiled and shook his head. "It's fine. Since you don't want to patrol, you can take a nap. I'm bored all day, and I can always watch Bing Tang. Besides, I'm not sick." Qin Yining smiled naturally, but Pang Xiao knew that she must have taken this matter to heart. Rather than having her ask Bing Tang and reveal the truth, it would be better for him to just say it himself. Thinking of this, Pang Xiao didn't ask Qin Yining anymore. He directly called for Bing Tang. Qin Yining naturally wanted to take a look behind Pang Xiao's back, but to no avail. Bing Tang still walked in quickly. Qin Yining quickly stood up and stood to the side. "Wang Yi, princess consort." Bing Tang bowed and looked at Pang Xiao and Qin Yining in confusion. The atmosphere between the masters wasn't right. Pang Xiao coughed and said, "Let your princess consort take a look at her pulse." She stood up and helped Qin Yining to the heated kang by the window to sit down. She just stood to the side and watched. The road had been bumpy these past few days, and they had to stop and walk. The road conditions weren't good enough for Qin Yining to maintain his usual habits. She didn't feel any discomfort, so her pulse had stopped. Bing Tang hadn't checked Qin Yining's pulse for half a month. Seeing Pang Xiao so nervous, Qin Yining's expression also became unnatural. He quickly looked serious and seriously checked. "Princess consort, are you feeling unwell?" Bing Tang frowned and said, "From the pulse, princess consort's body is weak. But as long as you take care of yourself, there won't be any major problems." Pang Xiao suppressed her confusion and uneasiness. She didn't say anything. At this time, Bing Tang had already arrived. Qin Yining could only ask, "My period has been delayed for 10 days. I wanted you to take a look." Bing Tang immediately understood and unconsciously looked at Pang Xiao. He turned and said, "Princess consort's diet these past few days has been rough, and you haven't rested well. This might not be a happy event. But 10 days is still short, and it can't be seen from the pulse. Why don't Princess Consort rest for the next few days, and this servant will take a look for you. In about a month, it will be confirmed." Qin Yining was slightly disappointed, But he also understood that a happy pulse wasn't something that could be found just because one wanted to. And depending on the person's physique, the timing of a happy pulse would be different. This couldn't be rushed. Her beautiful eyes turned to look at Pang Xiao, and then at Bing Tang. Qin Yining smiled and asked, "Speak, are the two of you hiding something from me?" Pang Xiao was such a heroic figure, but at this time, he was a bit uneasy. There was an awkward smile on his handsome face, and he couldn't help but scratch the back of his head. Bing Tang lowered his head and frowned. He didn't know how to respond for a moment. Seeing the two of them like this, it would be strange if he couldn't see the problem. Qin Yining pretended to be angry and asked, "What exactly are the two of you hiding from me? Could it be that you can't say it here?" "Sister Yi, don't be angry." Pang Xiao said with a smile, "Actually, there's nothing to hide from you. We're together all day long. Why wouldn't I tell you? This matter is actually..." Pang Xiao's tone was hesitant. Qin Yining's face gradually lost color. Could it be that there was something wrong with her body and she couldn't have children in the future? Seeing Qin Yining's face turn pale, Pang Xiao anxiously said, "Actually, it's because I took a kind of medicine. It's not easy for women to get pregnant for 5 years. That's why. I'm a bit surprised." Qin Yining's pupils shrank. He suddenly raised his head to look at Pang Xiao. "How long have you taken it?" "It's been 3 years." Pang Xiao could only obediently answer at this time. Qin Yining said in a low voice, "After I gave birth to Zhao Jie and Han Jie." Pang Xiao nodded. Seeing Qin Yining's furrowed brows, he anxiously wanted to explain. But Bing Tang was a step ahead of him. "Wang Fei, don't misunderstand. It was this servant who gave this medicine to Wang Yi. At the time, Wang Fei had suffered a lot when giving birth. It could be said that the process was tortuous and dangerous. Wang Yi felt sorry for you and didn't want you to suffer like this again. He privately found this servant and asked this servant if there was any medicine for men to take. My late father treated the nobles in the palace. In reality, he knew a lot of the secrets of the dukes and marquises' families. That kind of medicine did exist. I made it and gave it to Wang Yi." Qin Yining's almond eyes widened. He couldn't believe that Pang Xiao would do such a thing. What man didn't want to have more children? Because of this, men would take concubines. She never would have thought that not only did Pang Xiao not take concubines, he also gave himself this kind of sterilization medicine. The reason was because he was afraid that she would walk through the gates of hell every time she gave birth to a child. Tears streamed down her face and rolled onto her lapel, leaving dark tear stains on her face. Pang Xiao panicked when he saw her tears. He quickly hugged her and clumsily wiped away her tears with his big hands. "Sister Yi, don't cry, don't cry." Qin Yining was angry that he would do such a stupid thing in secret and pushed his hand away. Bing Tang also realized that he didn't say it clearly and quickly said, "Wang Fei, don't worry. This kind of medicine doesn't harm the body. It only uses the medicine to suppress pregnancy. After the medicine's effect is over, it can be recovered. Of course, this recovery varies from person to person. Some people will not be able to have children after using this medicine once. But some people have different physiques and will recover after 3 to 5 years. Wang Yi's body is good, so it won't affect your children in the future. You might be pregnant this time." Qin Yining frowned and said seriously, "Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Having children is a big deal. What if it really affects my children?" Pang Xiao quickly hugged her and shook her. He said gently, "Don't worry. Even if I can't have children, I have Zhao Jie and Han Jie. I don't want you to suffer, and I don't want to have children with other women. I already have 2 children. Why should I care about these things?" Qin Yining couldn't stop her tears from falling. She lowered her eyes and wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Her heart was sour and soft. She was moved and angry. She had mixed feelings. "I can't bear to see you cry. Don't cry. There is nothing wrong with my body. Maybe it's just like Bing Tang said. I have a good physique and the medicine's effect is over now." Qin Yining took a deep breath. Since it had come to this, it was useless to ask more. "Bing Tang, do you think Wang Yi's body is better now?" Bingtang said, Wang Yi's body is strong. There shouldn't be any problems. After all, they were different men and women. She couldn't ask too many details. Besides, Qin Yining suspected that she was pregnant. If she was really pregnant, it would explain everything. Qin Yining said worriedly, then if I really am pregnant this time and use that medicine, will it affect the child's body? Bingtang thought back to the case history she had seen at home. She remembered what her father had said and said with certainty, Wang Fei, don't worry. This medicine was researched by my father and other colleagues at the request of the nobles. Some wives who gave birth to children were worried that the illegitimate children would fight for favor. So, they secretly used this medicine on their husbands to give their children time. In the past, several people in the Dian imperial court used this medicine. I have the case history at home. So, I can confirm that their children are very healthy and won't be affected. Qin Yining knew that Bingtang's family had learned a lot. They were so familiar with each other. She had always been loyal to her, so she wouldn't lie. If it really was harmful, Bingtang wouldn't have dared to use this medicine on Pang Xiao. Thinking of this, Qin Yining slowly nodded. She urged Pang Xiao and said, go do your business. I'm going to sleep for a while. It was obvious that she didn't want to talk to Pang Xiao right now and wanted to chase her away. Chapter 11:19. When Bingtang saw how cautious Pang Xiao was, she could only nod helplessly. When Pang Xiao walked away, she turned to Qin Yining and said, Wang Fei, don't be angry at Wang Yi. At that time, when you gave birth to the two young masters, you suffered too much, and it really frightened the prince. He is a man, but in order to not let you suffer, he even thought of such a method. It is enough to show his sincerity to you. Seeing that Qin Yining only lowered her head slightly and refused to speak, Bingtang continued to speak. This servant was afraid that you would blame yourself if you knew, so I didn't want to tell you. Wang Yi only cared about you. We can't ruin his heart. Besides, this servant was confident that the medicine wouldn't harm Wang Yi's foundation. I just thought that it would be a good thing if you didn't get pregnant these past few years. First, the situation in the imperial court is unstable. You've been homeless for too long, so it's not suitable for you to have a child. Second, I wanted to help you nurse your body back to health. I understand that you have good intentions. Qin Yining sighed softly, we've been together since a long time ago. Although I had no choice but to take you in as a servant, I've always treated you like a sister in my heart. I naturally trust you. When Bingtang thought of the past, her heart was filled with emotions. Her long eyelashes fluttered, and a layer of mist covered her large eyes. Wang Fei, I know your difficulties, and I know that you're a kind person. I also know that you're in a difficult position. No one knows about the hardships you've suffered for Wang Yi. I've been by your side all day, so how could I not know? Fortunately, Wang Yi has always treated you the same. His feelings for you have never diminished because of prosperity, and they haven't changed because of the passage of time. When Wang Yi asked me about this medicine, I dared to give it to him because I know that Wang Yi cares about you and your feelings. Even if Wang Yi doesn't care about me, he will forgive me for your sake. Qin Yining was moved by Bingtang's sincere words. He held her hand and said, I understand. I can also understand what Wang Yi and you were thinking at that time. I can't put my feelings into words. I was also very worried. If he couldn't have any more children in the future, it would all be my fault. I'm not doubting his feelings for me. Look at my father. For the sake of his children, Bingtang nodded. She had an apple-shaped face and a petite figure. She looked like she was only 14 or 15 years old. However, because she had studied medicine for many years and had seen many kinds of diseases, she had a more thorough understanding of people's birth, aging, illness, and death. She also had a deeper understanding of the world. Wang Fei, the most sincere thing in this world is love, but the most fragile thing is also love. Wang Yi is really good to you, but no one can guarantee that there won't be any changes in the future. I'm not saying this because I want you to be on guard against anything. After all, the feelings in this world are so unpredictable. I just want to say that it's not bad for you to have these worries, but you really don't need to worry too much about them. Qin Yining felt that she had entered a wrong place. She couldn't help but let her imagination run wild. She couldn't even control her emotions. The present situation was not the time for her to let her imagination run wild. It was not the right time for her to think about these things. I understand what you're saying. It's just that emotions are not so easy to control. Thinking about it, I really shouldn't be like this. Wang Yi is already very good to me. Who can say for sure what will happen in the future? It's not necessarily going to develop the way I think it will. It's too early to start worrying about the future. Bing Tang smiled and nodded. Seeing that Qin Yining's brows were still furrowed in worry, she couldn't help but say, Wang Fei, I can't see the pregnancy pulse from your pulse, but I feel that you are the same as when you were pregnant with Ji Er. You are very emotional, and your mind has become more sensitive and soft. Qin Yining's slender and white hand gently stroked her stomach. She smiled. For this kind of thing, even if it can't be seen from the pulse, as a mother, my feelings are very accurate. I also feel that I might really be pregnant. I didn't say it at the beginning because I didn't want to be happy for nothing. Bing Tang smiled and said, it's not important. Wang Fei, don't worry. I'll work hard to adjust it for you. You should listen to me. Eat what I tell you to eat and sleep as long as I tell you to sleep. I guarantee that when you really want to give birth in the future, nothing will go wrong. Qin Yining's mood suddenly brightened and he nodded repeatedly. Pang Xiao was very uneasy. When she came back at night, she saw that Qin Yining was no different from usual. Bing Tang also nodded to her to indicate that everything was fine. Only then did she relax. After a simple dinner, Qin Yining helped Pang Xiao take off her clothes. Has there been any battle report from the court? How is the battle situation at North Marquis side? Pang Xiao sat on the edge of the bed wearing a snowy white undergarment. Qin Yining threw the outer robe in his hands onto the screen and pulled her into the warm blankets that had been warmed by the hot water mattress. He gave a long sigh of relief. The battle report hasn't arrived yet. Maybe it's because the weather is cold and our people's journey has been delayed. But the situation ahead definitely won't be good. During this period of time, the battle between Daeju and the Titan had been declining. Although Daeju had just been established and should be at the peak of its strength, the court did not have enough money. Furthermore, the Titan seemed to have realized that Daeju did not have enough money to fight a protracted war. Instead, they avoided the front line and purposely stalled for time with Daeju. No matter how capable Ji Ziyu was, he would not be able to lead soldiers who were full of resentment because they did not have enough to eat. After a few battles, Huichuan County had already been lost. They had retreated a few hundred li and were very close to the capital. If there was no improvement, the Titan might directly attack the capital. Wouldn't that be dangerous? The two of them thought about the worrisome battle situation and their hearts became heavy. After a good night's sleep, the latest battle report was delivered to them the next morning. When Pang Xiao saw it, she could not even eat breakfast. The situation is not good. Ah Lan and Jiao Wenliang have already led the Tiger Army and retreated to the last city outside the capital. What? Qin Yining turned pale with fright and dropped her chopsticks. The Titan are about to attack the capital? Pang Xiao nodded with a serious expression. She put down the battle report and opened the secret report. The report clearly stated the situation in the capital today, the attitude of the various parties, and the public opinion of the people. Pang Xiao glanced at it and passed it to Qin Yining. Sister Yi, take a look. Qin Yining picked up the chopsticks and passed them to Bing Tang to wash. Then, she turned around and took the secret report that Pang Xiao denied. When she read it, she was so angry that she laughed. It's really interesting. The self-indulgent ruler spent all his money. He can't take out money to buy food for the disaster victims, nor can he take out money to feed the army. Instead, he's blaming you. It was clearly written in the secret report. His Highness sent disaster relief and purchased the world's grain and fodder. Although many rich families and grain merchants were located in the north, they traveled tens of thousands of li to deliver grain and fodder to His Highness for disaster relief. They were not willing to sell to the imperial court to feed the tiger army and resist the Tartars. Those rich and merchants care about profits the most. They are not stupid. Of course, they will choose to sell the same food at a reasonable price. The emperor only said how much money he would give, but what he did was no different from plundering. He either forced the price down or wrote an IOU. He did not give money to the people who sold the food, and he often owed money. It was no different from asking people to give it to him for free. Of course, those people will sell the food to the party who can get the money. Qin Yining returned the secret report to Pang Xiao and said with a frown, "Once this news spreads, I'm afraid that the ministers in the imperial court will also resent us. Along the way, you painstakingly raised the food and dealt with those people. Gradually, you opened up the situation and used the food you bought to save so many people. But now that they are talking about it, you have become a sinner. Alright, there's no need to be angry over this." Pang Xiao smiled brightly. "Anyway, I have a clear conscience. Moreover, I feel very comfortable that the money was used on the people." His cheerful attitude made Qin Yining laugh. "God has given you the best reward for what you have done. You have gained the love and trust of the people and your subordinates." If Li Chitian knew about this, he would probably flip the table in anger. He did not want you to regain control of the tiger army, but you unexpectedly won the hearts of the people. Jiao Wenliang's ability is not as good as yours, and the war is getting more and more tense. Seeing that the Titan is about to break through the last city, Li Chitian will probably be angry and helpless. Pang Xiao smiled and nodded. He knew Li Chitian's character too well. At this time, he was afraid that his intestines would turn green with regret. But he had made the decision himself. No one had influenced his thinking, so he could not blame anyone. The relief in the old capital was carried out in an orderly manner. While Pang Xiao and Qin Yining were busy feeding and resettling the people, the imperial court was in chaos. In the imperial court, Li Chitian sat upright in the throne room. The court officials were quarreling over the war. Some people agreed to remove Jiao Wenliang and transfer Pang Xiao back to help Ji Zheyu. Some people tried to figure out the intentions of the emperor, saying that Pang Xiao regained control of the military power as a scourge. It was as if Pang Xiao would rebel as soon as he returned. Li Chitian felt a headache coming on. The situation these days was too anxious. He had not slept well for 2 days. When he came to the imperial court, it was noisy. When he returned to the imperial harem, the women in the imperial harem were even more anxious and forced smiles, as if the Titan were about to attack the imperial palace. The Empress Dowager even took his hand and asked him to send the women out of the palace for secret protection. Li Chitian was flustered and angry. As the emperor, he did not think of running away. The Empress Dowager and the imperial concubines were a group of freeloaders. They could not help him and instead made trouble for him. When they encountered trouble, the first thing they wanted to do was to run away. Li Chitian felt that he did not even have the strength to quarrel now. In the future, he would not settle the score with the Titan in the palace. He just ordered that the Titan would not be able to attack the imperial palace. Even if they did, the imperial family would rather die than let anyone live without purpose. When the Empress Dowager and Li Helan heard this, they hugged each other and cried bitterly. Li Chitian was so annoyed that his head hurt. Now the court officials were still quarreling and could not come up with any useful suggestions. He really could not bear it and scolded in a deep voice, "Shut up, all of you. I raised you so that you could speak freely and contribute to the country in times of crisis. How are you? What are you thinking now?" The emperor was angry, and the noisy people had to stop. Chapter 11:20. Your Majesty is wise. The officials bowed respectfully and did not dare to refute. With the current situation in the court, there was no other feasible solution other than ordering the troops to go to the capital to provide reinforcements. However, the mountain was high and the road was long, so it was inevitable that the journey would be delayed for a period of time. During this period of time, it was unknown whether Ji Zheyu and Jiao Wenliang could withstand the iron hooves of the Titan army. Your Majesty. At this time, another old official stood up and said loudly, "This official requests Your Majesty's permission to send Prince Jongshiren back to the capital to take over as the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army. Prince Jongshiren is brave and good at fighting. With Duke Dingwa's cooperation, they will definitely be able to break the deadlock of the Taitan." Once someone dared to stand up and make a suggestion, there were immediately people who came forward to agree. Li Chitian's brows were tightly knitted, and the veins on his forehead were throbbing. They were saying this again and asking him to send Pang Xiao back. Could it be that he would not be able to defend his country after he started Pang Xiao? Could it be that he was the only brave and good at fighting? He had many generals under his command, but all of them added together were not as good as Pang Zhishi. Li Chitian was silent. Immediately, someone who was good at guessing and discussing stood up to refute. Prince Jongshiren had a record of repeatedly disobeying imperial edicts in his early years. Your Majesty was merciful and did not pursue this matter, but Prince Jongshiren became more and more severe. Now in the south, he used the name of disaster relief to search for provisions everywhere. He took this opportunity to occupy the supply route, causing the court to have no provisions to support the front lines. His intentions should be punished. This official agrees. This official believes that Prince Jongshiren has the ambition of a wolf and has ulterior motives. If he sends people back at this time, it is completely inviting a wolf into the house. It is very likely that Daju's troops will be attacked from both sides. As soon as this was said, a general who admired Pang Xiao stepped forward and refuted in a loud voice, "You only know how to hide behind others. Have you ever fought in a war? Have you seen the cruelty of the battlefield? If I really asked you to go to the battlefield, I'm afraid you'd be scared to the point of peeing your pants, coward. What qualifications do you have to slander Prince Jongshiren?" Prince Jongshiren had made great contributions to the establishment of Daju. He was magnanimous and honest, loyal and devoted to Your Majesty. It was all because of you villains who instigated him behind his back, instigated him several times, and spread rumors to create trouble. Slandering Prince Jongshiren and sowing discord between Your Majesty and his subjects, what are your intentions? The civil official was so angry that his beard trembled. How can you be so presumptuous in the throne room? Your Majesty is wise and has his own decisions. How can he be swayed by a few words from others? Aren't you belittling Your Majesty with your words? Li Chitian's brows were tightly knitted as he listened to his subordinates quarreling over Pang Xiao. His heart was filled with irritation. He wished he could send these troublemakers out and behead them. He didn't want Pang Xiao to come into contact with the Tiger Army and didn't want him to regain military power. He was supposed to be providing disaster relief, but he actually made such a big fuss. He was clearly deliberately going against him. He was purchasing large quantities of grain from the outside, so that the troops resisting the Tartars did not have any grain to eat. Now he created this kind of power and influence, so that the common people of the groom side were praising him non-stop. Li Chitian was so angry that he was about to go crazy. "Shut up." Li Chitian couldn't bear it any longer and roared loudly. The throne room returned to silence again. Everyone lowered their heads cautiously and said in unison, "Your Majesty, please calm down. Calm down, calm down." Li Chitian stood up and walked around with his hands behind his back. "The Taitan are about to arrive. Do you all only know how to quarrel in the imperial court? If the Taitan really enters the capital, it's not only me who will suffer, but also your families and all the people in the capital. Once the country is destroyed, the Taitan's iron hooves will step over the capital and go straight to the central plains. Then all the people will be shrouded in the shadow of the iron hooves. They will be tortured, killed, and enslaved." Li Chitian said righteously and sternly, "I will never allow such a thing to happen. I won't take half a step back. I will stay in the capital and be the last line of defense for Daju. Your Majesty is benevolent." The officials kowtowed one after another. Some were even moved to tears. Li Chitian's tone softened slightly. "As for Prince Jongshiren, the disaster in the south is serious. The disaster relief is also to help me quell the chaos in the south. Prince Jongshiren is very capable. No matter in the south or the north, he has an irreplaceable role. Yes. The officials saluted. How could they not understand? Li Chitian obviously didn't want the Pang Xiao to have military power. Some old officials secretly shook their heads and sighed. Your Majesty doesn't know where his confidence comes from. The Taitan is now supported by Lu Heng's financial resources. In addition, Sai Qin and Lu Heng are both good at scheming. Ji Zhayu is leading 100,000 soldiers and horses. It's already not easy for him to hold on under the condition of lacking provisions. What's more, he has Jiao Wenliang by his side who orders him around. At this time, they are retreating step by step and are about to retreat to the capital. However, Your Majesty is still blindly confident that he is also an emperor and can defend the capital. Some old officials were even on the verge of tears. Under this turbulent situation, the common people's lives will only be more difficult in the future. After the court meeting, Li Chitian's decree was drafted by the cabinet. After Li Chitian looked through it, he distributed it to all parts of the country. In less than half a month, the troops from all parts of the country were in a dilemma. Even though Li Chitian had clearly stated in the imperial decree that he was inferior in terms of provisions, for the stability of the country and for the people of the Central Plains to not be ruled by foreign races, there were still soldiers and horses from all parts of the country who rushed to the capital. In the old capital, Pang Xiao, Yun Yantai, the leader of the 100,000 South Pacifying Army in the south, the newly appointed Commander Feng, also received the imperial decree. Commander Feng was ordered to command the 100,000 South Pacifying Army to guard the area between Daeju and southern Yang. He was originally idle. In addition, the South Pacifying Army was led by Pang Xiao and was well trained. Commander Feng had previously served under Pang Xiao. As soon as he received the imperial decree, he immediately rushed to the old capital to discuss with Pang Xiao. Wang Yi. The capital is in a state of emergency. The Taitan people dare to bully our capital. This is simply unbearable. As long as you give the order, our 100,000 South Pacifying Army will immediately follow Wang Yi to the north. I don't believe that we, a group of good men, can't beat those boorish Taitan people. Pang Xiao laughed and patted Commander Feng's shoulder. Brother Feng is still so forthright. Yes, there are many good men in Daeju. There are also many people who are willing to do their best for the country. It's our own business to overthrow the incapable ruler of BG. But if the foreign races want to invade, they have to weigh their weight. Commander Feng's blood was boiling. He nodded repeatedly. Wang Yi is right. But then he thought about it and was a little worried. It's easy to fight a war. We brothers are not afraid of death. None of us are cowards. But Your Majesty ordered us to prepare our own provisions. This is really difficult for us. Wang Yi, what do you think we should do? Pang Xiao smiled bitterly. Then he said in high spirits, what should we do? Even if we have to drink cold water and eat guanine clay along the way, we still have to rush back and defend the capital. Now that we're in this kind of situation, can we not care about Daeju and not save Your Majesty because of these reasons? Wang Yi is right. Commander Feng nodded repeatedly. Yun Yantai also sat in the hall and discussed with them. He heard Pang Xiao and Commander Feng's words clearly. He also had a deep understanding of Pang Xiao's prestige in the army. It seemed that even if he left the South Pacifying Army for a long time, Pang Xiao's influence in the South Pacifying Army was not to be underestimated. Needless to say, the brave Tiger Army led by Pang Xiao was even more so. It was no wonder that the Qiu family valued Pang Xiao so much. Pang Xiao seemed to only notice Yun Yantai now. He said with a smile, Yun Daren has worked too hard these days for disaster relief. However, once Your Majesty sends a decree to rescue the king, this king will have to rush back to the capital. In the future, disaster relief will still be handed over to Daren. Yun Yantai hurriedly stood up and said, Wang Yi is too serious. These days, the provisions that Wang Yi purchased have been sent over. In addition to the provisions sent over from the Wangfei's farmstead, it is enough for the people to survive this winter. Wang Yi's character is noble. He uses his own money to feed the people and is not willing to take credit for it. This official is truly impressed by Wang Yi's nobility. Yundaran is too serious. Pang Xiao waved his hand in shame. This king is far from enough. Right now, Daju is in danger. This king is about to rush back to the capital. This old capital will be entrusted to Yundaran. This is this official's duty. Yun Yentsai saluted. Pang Xiao and Yun Yentsai exchanged some pleasantries. Then, he told Commander Feng, "Go back and tell the brothers to get ready and listen to orders to break camp and set out at any time. Everyone, bring rations. Along the way, this king will think of a way to make sure everyone doesn't starve. We naturally believe in Wang Yi." Commander Feng and Pang Xiao saluted and quickly left. Pang Xiao pondered for a moment before rushing back to Qin Manor. Although the weather in the south was still cold, it was still far from being as cold as the capital. Pang Xiao only needed to wear a cloak over his thin outer robe to deal with the cold. Qin Yining, however, wore a large cloak with a fur collar and curled up in his quilt. The charcoal stove in the room was burning. Qin Yining was still a bit cold. He was sitting on the side of the bed and had Bing Tang tie him up to take his pulse. Although only half a month has passed, the pulse this time is very obvious. Bing Tang's face was filled with joy as he said with a smile, "Wang Fei's pulse is smooth and round like a ball bearing. It's an obvious pregnancy pulse. Congratulations, Wang Fei. You're really pregnant." Ji Yun, Han Xiao, and Zi Yuan couldn't help but laugh at the side. Qin Yining also smiled happily. After Pang Xiao used that medicine, she could finally confirm her pregnancy pulse. She could also confirm that Pang Xiao's body was fine. "Congratulations, Wang Fei." Ji Yun led the maidservants to salute. Qin Yining smiled and responded. He raised his slender white hand and waved. Just as he was about to speak, he heard the maidservant outside greet him loudly, "Wang Yi." The curtain was lifted. Pang Xiao untied his cloak and walked around the screen. Seeing Qin Yining's smiling eyes and the maidservants' happy faces, he couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong? What good thing happened? Why are you all smiling like this?" Bing Tang smiled and came forward. "Congratulations, Wang Yi. Wang Fei is already 1 month pregnant. Congratulations, Wang Yi." The maidservants bowed again. Pang Xiao stood by the bed and stared blankly at Qin Yining. She seemed to be stunned and didn't know where to put her hands and feet. "You're saying that Sister Yi is pregnant?" Qin Yining pretended to be angry and snorted. "Why does it look like Wang Yi is very unhappy?" Chapter 11:21. Qin Yining hadn't seen Pang Xiao act like a child for a long time. He couldn't help but laugh. Pang Xiao strode to the bed and sat down next to Qin Yining. His eyes were still full of surprise. He looked Qin Yining up and down, as if he was looking for a treasure. Bing Tang and Ji Yun looked at each other, then quietly left with Zi Yuan and Qin Yining, gently closing the door. "What are you looking at? Is it the first day you recognize me?" Pang Xiao stretched out his long arms and hugged Qin Yining in his arms. He sighed contentedly and happily, "That's great. Zhao and Han are going to have a younger brother and sister." Qin Yining rested her head on his shoulder. She was surrounded by the faint fragrance of grass and wood on his body and the unique cold fragrance of winter. She nodded with relief. "I just hope that Zhao and Han won't not recognize their mother when they see me next time." Pang Xiao pinched her cheek. "They won't. Father-in-law and grandmother pay special attention to these things. Didn't the 2 children keep looking at our portraits before? Besides, I will end the current situation as soon as possible. I won't let you and the children be separated forever." Hearing the excitement in his voice, Qin Yining asked with a smile, "Is there any progress in the court? Your Majesty has ordered all the troops to enter the capital to save the emperor." That was to be expected. The Taitan people were about to reach the capital. If Li Chitian didn't give an order, would he just sit and wait for death? Qin Yining sat up straight. Her long hair fell softly on her shoulders with her movements, reflecting her fair face. It seemed to be glowing under the light. "So, you're going to lead the troops into the capital to save the emperor? There's also the South Pacifying Army. Feng Dazhuang has already discussed it with me today. Your Majesty also asked the troops to prepare their own provisions. Qin Yining laughed mockingly. If you eat this bowl of soup now, it won't be easy to digest it in the future. When the world was in chaos, there were many people with lofty ideals from all over the country. Who could guarantee that after entering the capital, no one would be disloyal? At that time, what would Li Chitian use to guard against them, and what would he use to reward them? Could it be that he was still only moving his mouth? Pang Xiao's slender fingers slid through her soft, silky hair, which was slightly cold to the touch. I had originally planned to bring you with me to the capital this time. But your situation is different now. Qin Yining smiled and interrupted Pang Xiao's unfinished words. You don't want me to stay in the old capital, do you? Pang Xiao was at a loss for words. That was indeed what he thought. But looking at Qin Yining's bright eyes that seemed to have seen through everything, Pang Xiao couldn't say anything. Aren't you afraid that I'll be kidnapped? This place isn't far from the Qiu family's property. Qiu Feishan is an unscrupulous person. Last time, her negotiation with you fell through, so she definitely won't give up easily. She will definitely find all kinds of ways to achieve her goal. Pang Xiao's expression changed when he heard this. Come back with me. Pang Xiao grabbed her hand, his dry lips falling on the back of her delicate hand. Qin Yining laughed out loud. Don't worry, I know what to do. Let's go back to the north first. If it's really not suitable to take me with you, you can find a suitable place to hide me. He said it like he was going to hide a treasure, but she really was his treasure. Okay, I'll listen to you. Pang Xiao saw Qin Yining and told her to eat first. Then he went out to discuss with the strategists about returning to the capital. Although the disaster relief in the south wasn't smooth, Wang Yi scattered all the treasures, giving the people some time to breathe. Now, there are only 2 more months until spring and flowers bloom. If they work hard this year, they won't starve to death. Xie Yu smiled, 2 more wrinkles appeared on her face. Xu Weiji also said, maybe by the time the autumn harvest comes, the Taitan people will have been driven out. How can it be that easy? Pang Xiao couldn't help but laugh. The Taitan people have the support of the Lu family this time. The Lu family has also allied with many Biji people to restore the country's old subordinates. This war is going on extremely anxiously. Jilan isn't a stupid person. When it comes to war, even if I go against him, I'm afraid I won't be able to gain the upper hand. Now that he's being suppressed, it's all because of objective reasons. Wang Yi is right. Duke Ding is also brave and good at war, but he can't control the imperial court. The supplies from the imperial court haven't arrived yet, and the soldiers are hungry. Naturally, they are resentful. In addition, Gao Wenliang is giving orders from the side, so it's even more difficult to mobilize the troops. Moreover, after being defeated once, twice, their morale will be damaged. All kinds of unfavorable conditions are stacked together, but Duke Ding still managed to catch up. Everyone sighed. He didn't have the right time, place, and people. It was hard for Ji Zheyu to persist until now. Pang Xiao and the other strategists had a careful discussion. The departure of an army was not like the departure of a few dozen of them. They had to go through a strict deployment. Fortunately, everyone was experienced. The matter of marching an army was not a difficult problem. Pang Xiao led everyone until all the details of returning to the capital had been finalized. He then ordered people to make preparations. Immediately after, he stood up and went to the inner residence. Why is Wang Yi in such a hurry today? Looking at Pang Xiao's back, Xu Weiji was somewhat puzzled. Perhaps he's about to set off, so he still has many things to prepare and bring along. After all, this was the Wang Fei's maternal home. Everyone was puzzled, but in the blink of an eye, they dropped their hands and went to busy themselves. Pang Xiao dashed back to the inner residence and stared at Qin Yining without blinking, afraid that something would happen to her if she bumped into something. Even Bing Tang and Ji Yun were busy packing their luggage. Pang Xiao was afraid that they would disturb Qin Yining. Wang Yi, what are you doing? I'm very well now, and I don't feel anything wrong with my body. Why is Wang Yi so nervous? Pang Xiao shook his head repeatedly. You are pregnant, so you have to be more careful. I'll have people prepare a few more layers of mattresses in a bit, and the duck feather mattress you made for me. It'll come in handy this time, so the carriage won't be jolted. Qin Yining could only nod and agree. With you by my side, nothing will happen. Why are you so nervous? How could he not be nervous? The reason he had hardened his heart to use that medicine was because he was afraid that Qin Yining would suffer the pain of childbirth again. Who would have thought that the heavens had their own plans, and she still ended up pregnant? Pang Xiao still felt fear when he thought about the events of the past. It was truly too dangerous for a woman to give birth. Pang Xiao could only be anxious, but he couldn't help. He could only constantly be careful of Qin Yining's situation, pay attention to all the details, and do what he should do to the extreme. Just as Pang Xiao and Qin Yining were intensely planning the itinerary and preparing the army to return to Jing to rescue the king, Li Qitian was sitting in a daze in the imperial study. The battle report in his hand seemed to have a temperature, becoming hotter and hotter, so hot that he couldn't help but loosen his grip. A thin piece of paper floated to the ground, but the news on it seemed to weigh 1,000 kilograms, so heavy that Li Qitian couldn't breathe. Bastards, bastards. You're all a bunch of trash. Li Qitian suddenly exploded and roared angrily. 100,000 Tiger Army, 5 military battalions, and the Divine Arms Battalion actually couldn't defeat a mere Taitan. Retreat to Jing? If we lose Jing, Daju's imperial court will no longer exist. Where else can we retreat to? Your Majesty, please quell your anger. The assistant minister of the Ministry of War fell to his knees with a thump, trembling in fear. Xiong Jinshui and the other eunuchs also knelt in a corner, not daring to make a sound for fear that Your Majesty's attention would shift to them. Aside from their fear of Li Qitian, everyone's hearts seemed to be shrouded in a layer of dark clouds. Ji Ziyu and Gao Wanliang's troops were defeated like a landslide, and their group was already retreating to Jing. Once the Taitan's iron hooves broke through the city gates, wouldn't they all be buried with them? They really wanted to leave this troublesome place, so that they wouldn't end up losing their lives even though they didn't get much money. Li Qitian was full of anger and had nowhere to vent it, but he couldn't think of any other way, so he could only agree to it. When he returned to Yangshan Palace Hall, he felt as if grass had grown on his body, making him restless. He walked out of the door with his head down, holding his breath as he wandered outside. Before he knew it, he had arrived at Cunning Palace Hall. Cunning Palace Hall was warm in the afternoon, and both inside and outside were lit with silver frost charcoal. The Empress was leaning on the warm kang, reading a book. When she heard the palace servant greet her, she hurriedly got up and gracefully bowed. "Chunxie greets Your Majesty." Li Qitian was like an enraged fighting bull. He snorted from his nostrils and sat down with a dark face, panting heavily. His furious appearance caused everyone in the Palace of Earthly Tranquility to keep quiet out of fear. The Empress tried hard to recall what she had done recently, for fear that she had done something wrong and made the Emperor unhappy. But she couldn't think of anything even after racking her brains. She could only give up and blame everything on the imperial court. The palace maid brought in a tea tray. The Empress turned around and took the white porcelain bowl. She held it with both hands and gently placed it beside Li Qitian's hand. She said softly, "Your Majesty, please have some tea." Li Qitian's face was ferocious. He gritted his teeth and looked at the tea bowl. His anger, fear of the future, and jealousy of Pang Xiao seemed to no longer need to be concealed in front of his wife. He waved his wide sleeves, and the tea bowl was fiercely overturned on the ground. The sound of broken porcelain made the Empress tremble. "Your Majesty, please calm down." The Empress hurriedly ordered the palace maids to pick up the pieces. She didn't dare to use brooms and dustpans, for fear that the sound of sweeping would disturb the Emperor. Li Qitian didn't appreciate her kindness. In his anger, he didn't care about his face and shouted, calm down, calm down. Everyone only wants me to calm down, but they can't think of a practical way. Are the soldiers of Daju 3 years old? When they meet the Taitan, they are scared witless and only know how to retreat. The Empress didn't dare to say a word. After hearing such bad news, it was no wonder that Your Majesty was furious. Even she, a woman, felt a chill in her heart. It was as if the knife of the country's destruction was hanging over her head. Li Chitian slammed the table and said angrily, "Pang Zhishi, that insidious and cunning bastard. I knew that guy was scheming, but I didn't expect that he would ignore the safety of the country and the imperial court." When the Empress heard Li Chitian mention Pang Xiao, her heart suddenly jumped. Could it be that Pang Xiao went to the south and rebelled? Li Chitian slammed the table and said angrily, "I don't know where he got the money to buy food wantonly. If it weren't for him, Duke Ding's army wouldn't be short of food and fodder, and the morale of the army would be in chaos. Pang Zhishi is really born to suppress me." Chapter 11:22. The Empress let out a long sigh. As long as Pang Xiao didn't rebel, Diaju could still be saved. She didn't think she was a smart woman and couldn't be compared to Prince Zhongxuan's consort. However, she had been in a high position for a long time and often interacted with noble women. The Empress knew a little about the affairs of the court. The stability of the world didn't depend on Li Chitian, but on Pang Xiao. If Pang Xiao was willing to be a subject, everything would be fine. However, if Pang Xiao had the intention to rebel, Li Chitian wouldn't be able to stop it. This was also the reason why Li Chitian repeatedly wanted to eradicate Pang Xiao. As long as Pang Xiao didn't rebel, they wouldn't be attacked from the front and back. There was still hope for the current crisis to be resolved. The Empress smiled and persuaded, "Your Majesty, please calm down. Prince Zhongxuan was ordered to provide disaster relief. It is also his duty to buy food to feed the people. Please don't be angry. This is precisely the time when there are internal and external troubles. We need Your Majesty and the subjects to work together to resist the Tartars. If Your Majesty misunderstands Prince Zhongxuan, I am afraid you will fall into the trap of someone with ulterior motives." The Empress's voice was neither fast nor slow. She carefully observed Li Chitian's expression. After she finished speaking, she didn't see Li Chitian fly into a rage on the spot. The Empress secretly sighed in relief. She secretly thought that Your Majesty was a smart person and wouldn't act rashly at such a critical time. However, perhaps she was relieved too early. Li Chitian looked up at the Empress with a dark face for a long time. Suddenly, he grabbed something and threw it at the Empress. The two weren't far apart and the Empress wasn't on guard. She only felt a buzzing sound in her head and a hard object hit her forehead. It was so painful that she blacked out and even lost her mind for a moment. Looking at the broken porcelain plate on the ground, Li Chitian roared like a roaring lion. "Good, very good. Over the years, I have actually raised someone else's Empress." The Empress had just come back to her senses when she heard this. Her heart skipped a beat, and she immediately realized that she had said too much. Lifting her skirt, the Empress knelt down and kowtowed 3 times. Her ears were buzzing and her head hurt, but she didn't care. "Your Majesty, please don't be angry. Your concubine did everything for Your Majesty's sake." Now that they urgently needed to resist the Tatan, there was no time to think about other things. "Your Majesty is a wise ruler of the present age. You have thought through everything clearly. This concubine spoke too much because she was worried. I shouldn't have interfered in court affairs. I won't do it again." Li Chitian narrowed his eyes and stared at the Empress's figure. His anger subsided a little. He knew his wife well. This woman was just an ordinary village woman. She was kind and efficient in her work. She was lucky to have married him and had the opportunity to become the Empress. All these years, she had been well behaved and had never participated in the affairs of the imperial court. She was also a clumsy person. If she knew how to conduct herself, how could she have interceded for Pang Xiao? Although Li Chitian was open-minded, he still couldn't calm down. He sneered, "People like you can't distinguish between inside and outside. Those ministers in the imperial court all have their own considerations. I didn't expect you to be the same. You really make me feel disgusted." The Empress felt cold all over, as if she had been thrown into an ice cave in the dead of winter. When they were just ordinary husband and wife, Even if they weren't very sweet, they were still a harmonious couple. However, as Li Chitian climbed higher and higher, she also became farther and farther away from him. Now, he didn't like her anymore. She was old and faded, but there were many young girls in the palace who were as delicate and beautiful as flowers. Thinking about it, after being husband and wife for so many years, Li Chitian had seen all kinds of prosperity. Even if their familial love had been wiped clean. Although thinking like this could comfort herself and make her feel better, there was a voice in the Empress's mind that denied her. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining had been married for many years, but Pang Xiao had never treated Qin Yining the way Li Chitian treated her. He had made a fool of her in public, made her lose face, and even hit her. The Empress lowered her head and pursed her lips. She didn't know how to persuade Li Chitian or what else to say. She only felt disheartened and didn't have the energy to care about what Li Chitian wanted to do. Li Chitian saw that the Empress didn't speak and felt that Cunning Palace was no longer interesting. Seeing the Empress like this made him feel even more nauseous. He immediately got up and walked out. The Emperor flew into a rage in the Empress's palace and even smashed the Empress with a bowl. This news spread like wildfire and quickly spread throughout the imperial palace. When the concubines came to pay their respects the next day, they couldn't help but take a few more looks when they saw the Empress's bruised forehead. Some people even laughed wildly in their hearts. The Empress sat at the head of the table with a decent smile on her face, but her mind was not here. Some of the concubines kept probing with their words, which annoyed the Empress. She directly said, "Ben Gong won't talk about the battle outside, but I think you've all heard about it. The Taytan army is like a hot knife through butter. Our dynasty is no match for them." Marquis Bei Ding had no choice but to retreat to the capital. The room was silent. The concubines didn't seem to have the mood to investigate the Empress' injuries. Ji Zhayu had retreated to the capital with his army and the Taytan had surrounded the walls of the capital. Once the city was broken, how could they survive? "Nyang Nyang, did your Majesty say how we sisters will be settled?" a concubine boldly asked. The Empress smiled and looked at the beautiful young woman. She gently said, "You and I sisters are your Majesty's concubines. To say something unpleasant, if that day really comes, you and I will naturally have to keep our chastity for your Majesty. So if the concubines really lost the battle, they would have to collectively slit their throats." Some of the younger ones were so scared that their faces turned pale. Some even cried on the spot. The Empress said, "It hasn't progressed to that stage yet. It's not to the point where the army will collapse. However, this consort is saying all of this to give all of you younger sisters a warning. Think about it for the next few days. If you have any regrets, do it as soon as possible. If you miss your family, write to them as soon as possible. If that day really comes, Ben Gong won't allow anyone to betray your Majesty." The Empress narrowed her eyes and glanced at everyone. She said in a deep voice, "Do you remember clearly?" "Yes." All the women stood up and bowed. The Empress nodded and dismissed everyone. She then ordered the Memar beside her to go to the Cold Palace. "Go and tell the palace maid in charge of the Cold Palace. It's time to deal with concubine Shun." "Yes, this servant will go now." The Empress's arrangements made the concubines panic. For a moment, they didn't know what to do. Some went back and covered themselves with their blankets and cried. There were also people who anxiously wrote letters to their families, wanting to beg for a way out. For a moment, the palace was in a state of panic. Even the Empress Dowager and Li Helan heard the news. The two had no time to blame the Empress because they were also in fear. The Empress Dowager was older, but she wasn't calm. When she thought about how she, as the Emperor's mother, had nowhere to run, she couldn't help but feel sad. She hugged Li Helan and cried again and again. On the contrary, Li Helan was calmer. She was Ji Zhayu's wife. If Ji Zhayu died in battle, she would definitely be captured by the Taytan. If that day really came, as the Empress said, their lives would be hung with white silk. After understanding this, Li Helan calmed down. At this time, the most important thing was not to worry about her own escape, but to think of a way to help Daeju survive this crisis. Li Helan told the Empress Dowager her analysis and thoughts. The Empress Dowager immediately sent someone to find Li Chitian. Li Chitian was very busy. How could he have the mind to come to Xi'an Palace to pay his respects? The Empress Dowager couldn't see him, so she could only ask the chamberlain beside her to pass on a message to Li Chitian. Tell the emperor what I said. The most important thing now is to protect Daju from being trampled by the Titan. Pang Zhishi has been on the battlefield for a long time. If she cooperates with Ji Lan, she will definitely be able to defeat the Titan. Tell the emperor to think carefully. The chamberlain listened to the Empress Dowager's words and sweated profusely. He didn't want to go, but he didn't dare to go against the Empress Dowager's wishes. But if he went, he had a bad feeling. Your Majesty might not let him go. This situation was basically a dead end. But the chamberlain had no other choice. He could only go to the imperial study, remove the sharpness of the Empress Dowager's words, and relay the meaning. Li Chitian sat behind the Paulownia table in the imperial study. His hands gradually tightened and he gripped the bright yellow brocade tablecloth. You dog servant, did the Empress Dowager say this? Replying to your Majesty, the Empress Dowager indeed told me to say this. The chamberlain kowtowed again and again. He already felt that his life was over. Li Chitian sneered coldly, you can't help in the matters of the imperial court, but you never cause trouble. The chamberlain didn't dare to speak. He wished that he didn't exist. Go and tell the Empress Dowager to be prepared. If the Titan really breaks into the city, the Empress Dowager has to set an example. Could it be that the Empress Dowager, who has been wise all her life, is not as knowledgeable as the Empress? This was clearly to let the Empress Dowager be prepared to go on the road. The chamberlain bowed in fear and left. Returning to Xi'an Palace, he told the Empress Dowager Your Majesty's instructions. As expected, the Empress Dowager suddenly stood up and said angrily, Nonsense. How could the Emperor speak to me like this? Could it be that you, a lowly servant, made it up? The Empress Dowager is wise. Even if I had the guts, I wouldn't dare to make up an imperial edict. Your Majesty did say this. The Empress Dowager was so angry that she felt dizzy and flew into a rage. If it weren't for her identity as the Empress Dowager and that she was no longer the village woman she used to be, she would have cursed out everything dirty and smelly. The Empress Dowager was so flustered, let alone other people. From top to bottom in the imperial palace, no one was not flustered. They tried to find a way to survive. Although Li Chitian was concerned about the matters of the imperial court, he had heard several versions of the rumors in the imperial palace. Before the Titan reached the capital, someone had already determined that he would lose. Was he really not going to pass this hurdle this time? When Pang Xiao finished preparing everything and the army was ready to set out, it was already 3 days later. Qin Yining walked out of the inner residence of Qin's mansion with the help of Pang Xiao with a delicate hand warmer in her arms. She took a carriage and left through the side gate, heading all the way to the gate of the old capital. Pang Xiao's mount, Black Cloud, followed beside the carriage. The rest of the bodyguards guarded the carriage. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.